predicting the
Bro,
Furia
if
in
Furia
Brazil.
gets top 3, I'll get a tattoo.
And there was one thing he said to me: if we beat Gambit, we're winning this whole tournament. That's
I mean, that's
gonna be a
enough.
big
Yep.
one right there.
Yep.
But
Yeah, I think you might have picked the wrong guy for the positive take. But for me, the thing I always respected about Fnatic,
I would say the only light at the end of the tunnel is the tunnel to their boarding gate, bro.
So Tanny, you're back. We went off that tangent. That's normal thing with Van Silly as a host. Van Silly as the one that's going to talk. And let's go ahead and hit straight up into the group. So starting off with Group A, we can look at the bracket first. We have Envy, Vivo Keyd, Acend, and X10. So before we actually break down into every single one of these teams, what do you think about the Group A so far, just looking at this group? Like, is this like a fun group to watch, a fun group to pay attention to? Is it the group to look at?
I think it's actually one of the more balanced in terms of how close each of them to each other. I think X10 is like weaker than the rest, but I think Vivo Keyd and Acend are be damn close to each other, and Envy, they're a little bit above, but like not miles ahead, you know?
Oh, shit. Okay, so let's get into it right now then, because I want to talk about Acend. So if we're looking at the roster, of course, there's always going to be that superstar CNED that's going to be in this roster, right? So everybody knows CNED. Everybody knows what CNED could do. But even when you're looking at this full roster, it's still a very good roster with Stark, So, Zeke, Bone Cold, and Killes, where even Zeke is like a sleeper pick that people don't really pay attention to when you're looking at this roster.
Zeke has had more impact on LAN than CNED did, and that's odd to say considering the number puts down. But if you actually go back and watch the VOD, Zeke is just constantly getting the entries whenever it's needed, you know? He's creating so much space, especially on the Rays. He's one of the biggest reasons they won versus us on they Izzy couldn't like keep up with him at all. And you've got the map where we lose versus them here. That's good.
You know what? At least from this matchup from SMB and Acend, like when I was watching this game, I still have to give a lot of like credit to Pora. I don't think people were talking about Pora that much. We were talking about Izzy as that jet trying to like create that space that we wanted to. But I think Pora really stepped up into this series overall for SMB to like be that anchor killjoy player into the B site. But overall, yeah, SMB unfortunately fell kind of short, and we know what happens after with that roster where, you know, everybody's looking for opportunities right now. But then just focusing back on Acend, like they looked like a team that was going to be so dominant going into this one, with maybe one of the favorites of like top 2, maybe even winning it all. And then they get into a game where they have to play against 100 Thieves, where, you know, we all know the storyline of the Breeze game where, you know, you had that off pick from Nitro coming out as that jet, and then they were still able to do some great impact, though, for Acend, right? Like, CNED was still popping off onto that map until 100 Thieves, you remember the interview from Nitro said, oh, yeah, we had to just start avoiding CNED at some point and go somewhere else. But what happened there? Like, what weaknesses did you potentially see watching these games? Because if you're saying that Zeke was able to get those kills when they needed him the most, where did 100 Thieves find their success against Acend going into the series?
I mean, Thieves had such an insane comeback on this map. Like, they just composure perfectly. Acend just got overconfident. They thought like, oh, 11, we're on 10. We can easily close this out, you know? We only need a couple more, whatever, guys. So I had to make more key plays, and then punished by it, by a team who played the same, was triple overtime or the first round, you know? Zeke, I don't think had that much of an impact in that on that map, but I think where he really shines is the range. Obviously, he was playing it on Breeze.
Of course. And just to want to check here, I think we actually have like a tag team sub that's gonna hop on and hang out with us, though, because I think we have Dream in the trenches.
Nice.
Just like he was supposed to come on later, but he's like, fuck it. He sees that these guys are like needing some help. We want to bring somebody else in. Yo, Dream. That is so, homie.
Hello. Hello. How's it going? Sorry, I'm
How's
muted.
it going, man? Good to see you. Did you get a new haircut?
Yeah, I did. in the winter, I like cutting it and then letting it reset. You know.
Dude, that's awesome. It looks good. Even though, like, you know what? As it's sort of pixelated, so I feel good today because I finally am the person that has the best camera and not the person that's pixelated. I have two people that are slightly more pixelated than I am. And then, chat, if you actually look at Dream with how pixelated, like slightly pixelated he is, don't you think he looks a bit like Skadoodle? Right?
A little
Isn't there
bit.
some
I
resemblance
see it.
to
I see
Skadoodle?
it.
Right? Come on.
With,
I'm gonna start calling you
the
Tyler from
with
now
the
on.
C9.
That's true. That's
Yeah,
true.
there
That's
we
true.
go.
It's
Yeah.
C9 Skadoodle. How was the major, man? Like, let's go back into
Oh,
the roster and
let
talk
me.
about
I
this.
got some stories, man.
Sorry, man. Tangent silly. Back at it. But Dream, thanks for tagging in here and talking about Group A with us.
Yeah, for sure.
And before we get into Group B, so we're just talking about Ascend pretty much at this point. Going into the previews of these teams. And for me, we were talking about like the weaknesses that we potentially saw here from Ascent going into Berlin from playing 100 Thieves. Do you think this right now has been fixed at this point going into Champions? Because when you looked at their past tournaments, let's say Red Bull Homeground or even looking at the LVPs, they finally got more reps going into LAN as well. Is this going to help them out to be like, okay, they are a serious contender as a top 3 going out into Champions and closing out the year?
So I think it's really hard to say. But what I do think is important is obviously what seemed like at the time in Berlin as like, okay, land jitters, they're like underperforming on stage, right? It does look like that's the case because they have been in form recently. They've been playing well recently. And having those individual level contributions from Bone Cold and CNET and Starzo, where they have just like huge rounds, right? So they've been doing that again. So it does look like that was land jitters and not them having a serious decline, right? So the question is just, are they going to have those issues? And those issues kind of got worse like the further into the event that they got. They didn't like show up playing bad. They just kind of fell apart in the 100 Thieves series, right? So to me, that's like a lesson that you can definitely learn from as a group of players, especially. I mean, a lot of the players are young on the team as well. So yeah, I mean, I expect them to make it through the group stage looking like good Ascend. I think the question is just once they get further in, if they'll be able to keep that up. But I think we'll see in any matches they play in this group stage, the better version of Ascend, not the potential, backs against the wall Ascend. I don't think they're not going to be put in that position in this group, no matter what happens, basically. So I think they'll play fine.
So then I'm gonna go and skip over Envy for now, and then just start talking about Vivo Keyd, so we can actually talk about this matchup too right after. So Vivo Keyd, looking at this roster as well, they just came back with a new addition to the team, being MW0 or just MW. What's your thoughts overall about MW0 from what you've been hearing through the trenches? Sorry, that he's playing a bit of Sky, he's playing a bit of Sova. He's just playing Initiator pretty much instead of being that Jet or like the Raze second entry for his previous team. I think that was Game Laners, right? So let's start with you, Tanny. What's your thoughts on MW0 going in as a Sova potentially into this tournament? Is this actually going to weaken up like his potential of what he could bring to the table for the team?
I mean, he was the superstar on Game Landers by far. Going into this, I think it's going to be a bit hard for him to adjust to the role because things like Sky are not actually that easy to play on the pro level. It just depends how long he's been doing it. We haven't scrimmed them yet, so I don't know like how they actually look. But if he can get adjusted to that role, that is a huge amount of firepower he's bringing, and especially on that role, it's really important. It's why players like Sick or Russ or even Zeke, they pop off so hard on those roles, and they're basically like the second duelist when you don't have one. And if you can do that well, I think Ascend are actually gonna have a tough matchup. I don't think it's as easy as you're making it out to be, Dream. for them.
That's what I was gonna say because
Yeah.
at this point too, like you were telling me before Dream got on here, Tanny, that you know Envy's a step maybe slightly ahead of Acend and Vivo Keyd, but it seems as you put these two teams pretty evenly against each other going into this matchup, where you might think Vivo Keyd might get the win over Acend. Is that what you're thinking?
Well, I'm pretty sure
Or
Ascend is still
could?
going to get the win,
Okay.
but I think it's a little bit closer than people expect it to be. I think people are expecting like, oh yeah, Envy and Ascend, easy
Mhm.
top two, making it out, no problem at all. But I think that's only the case for Envy. I think Ascend or Vivo could both make it out. It just depends who shows up on the day.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
I agree with what Dream said in terms of the LAN performance. They'll definitely be better this time round than last time round. Um, and if they bring their A game like they do online, then yeah, they should be taking that map, no problem.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
mean the match.
Yeah, because even when we're looking at the roster with MW0, where you know the official matches that he's played so far in the past 30 days or whatnot, we don't have any type of stats on that, right? There's no games that he's played. But then on the games that he's played, he's actually played Sky, and then the Sky was okay. You know, it wasn't like the best Sky in the world. It wasn't like game changing at all for the teams that he's played for. But if it's going to be that Sova, which is like that S-tier agent that you really need for a lot of these maps, I think that he could definitely be that type of player that could support somebody like Heat. To be able to pop off like everybody knows that Heat could do, right? And that said, like, are we so I had Heat. So funny enough, I did this thing with a top 20 with Upcomer last time, and like the Brazilian scene hated me for Xing out Heat and out of the top 20, which was a troll chat. Don't worry about it. But when you look at how well he's performed at Masters 3 for Heat, it was playing against like the Kru or whatnot, where playing against I think they played against Envy, and then they played against Kru. I think there you go, that where he kind of like fell off, right? Are we actually putting Heat a little bit too high up in terms of what he could bring to the table for this team after all?
I don't think so. I think Heat's nuts.
Yeah.
I think Heat's really, really good. I think that there were some things that you can go back. I was actually watching some of Envy's stuff back, just
Yep.
because they haven't played much since the event. But I was watching some Berlin VODs or whatever, and I was going back, and there was a lot of stuff that, like, a lot of resources that were put into shutting Heat down and dealing with the Opper. And I think that those are lessons that Heat can learn from and learn, like, when they're shutting you down, what are ways you can still look to make plays as a jet op? And how can you switch up your timings or your pathings and get value that way, because they're going to be, expecting you to be playing in certain spots or expecting you to react to utility in certain ways. And you take your fights differently, and you find more ratty things to do when you have that dash up in the face of the util, right? I think that, yeah, that Heat got focused really, really hard by a high caliber of team, and that there is no reason that should be as effective again. I think he's going to show a very good performance. I think that Keyd Stars has a lot of firepower. I just think that it's hard in my mind to come in and have a new Sova, and then their Sova, who I think was their IGL, is also playing a different role now, right? So that's kind of like two role swaps, at the same time going in. So it feels like you will have to rely a lot on that firepower and a lot less on some of the synergy stuff and the set plays and things. You're not going to be as prepared as other teams in those ways. And Acend is definitely one of the teams in this tournament that, if your way of winning is like mech diffing them, that's not a good matchup.
It's making me think as well, like maybe for Vivo Keyd going into this tournament, where potentially you're not really looking at. Well, Brazil is kind of always known to like not only hold the W, but when they exec, it's like we're executing right away, and there's like not really any pulls off, right? We want to play for those trades and stuff like that too. But if we go to a part where you have NW0 that's taken a step back from being a second duelist and being more of like a utility agent to support his team, then I'm starting to feel that you could potentially have somebody like NW0 that's going to be helping Heat in the first place, but also might be that type of player that can entry on the other end if they are going to run defaults and start pulling out rotations. I like to see that coming out from Vivo Keyd a little bit more. I like to see that coming out of Brazilian teams in general. Instead of relying too much on the firepower and on the trades, because I think this is something similar that I mentioned when I was doing like VOD reviews for the Game Changers in Europe, where you're still playing the game kind of like you're playing for trades and you're playing like a Counter-Strike style, where if you're playing it as a Valorant style, using a little bit more of that utility and pulling out the rotations thanks to utility, you can get so much free information without having to show your bodies and sacrificing your the risk of losing a player early into the round that could maybe help out. So I'm hoping to see that coming into to champions here for at least all the Brazilian teams. But also when we're back on this topic of Heat, you know, there was that rumor going through that he was injured or that he had some sort of illness going into that match versus Kru, which is why he also was underperforming. But I heard through the trenches, actually, it was a DM that came to me before we started the show, that apparently in his streams, he was mentioning that he was already feeling that prior to going into the event already. So for him to put up the good numbers overall against these two teams, I think it was Zeta Division and whatnot before they got out of the groups, he is still able to put up good numbers. And maybe to your point, Dream, that's where he got kind of shut down going into the Envy matchup and also to the Kru, because you're focusing a lot on a team that could actually shut him down quite well. So back to you here, Tanny. What do you think about Heat overall going into champions?
No, I agree with Dream. Like, I hope he's learned from getting countered in Berlin.
Mm-hmm.
Coming into champions, if he can't adapt to how these other jet ops are playing as well into him, I don't think it's going to work out too well for him.
Mm.
But if he can, and he's not just completely static, like there's a few out there, I think they can actually have a good chance versus Ascend. And especially the way that Cena's been playing right now, I think it's a little bit dated. I don't think he's quite on the edge of how to play the jet. I think people like Leaf Ye are doing new stuff, and I think
Mhm.
Cena's fallen a little bit behind. So if he can make up that gap, I definitely think they're in with a shot.
Hmm. So what's your winning conditions then if you think that Vivo Keyd has a chance against Ascend here?
Honestly, I think it's just how well Mazura ends up playing in the new team. Because if he's still stuck in that old like duelist mentality,
Yeah.
and ends up losing a lot of duels and costing them a lot of like first bloods, this is not going to be a fun matchup to watch. If he's adapted to the role, if he's being a bit more supportive, which I'm sure is perfectly capable of, then I think this is going to be way, way better for them.
Yeah. It's going to be a good one to check out because again, they have as Dream you mentioned fire potential right now for these three players because Maurice is going to be also one that we haven't talked about, but has also been a person that's or player that put up good numbers and was very impactful as that second duelist. So if you're not giving that role there to MW0, then at least you still have somebody not playing a secondary duelist, but it could still frag very well. And we'll see how that's going to pan out here for Vivo Keyd moving forward. But I want to save the best for last, at least for this group. I want to move forward now to X10. So looking at just X10 in general here, for me, it's the biggest question mark. I feel that this could be the type of team for X10 that has like the Blast Premier run Vitality style going into champions where, you know, at the end of this tournament, the team might implode or they might lose their star player in Patty Pan, reportedly potentially going back to Overwatch League after. Right, so having to play that type of like no pressure style, let's just have some fun, let's go out with a bang. I mean, Vitality made it to the grand finals right against Na'Vi of the Blast Premier. They might lose one of their star players, being Shocks going over to potentially Team Liquid at this point for CS. So Patty Pan, the way that he's just jumping out of the stage right now, might be jumping into the server with that same type of like, let's just have some fucking fun and go. Is this going to be the type of playstyle here, starting with you, Dream? The way that this team could potentially upset any of these other 3 teams in the group?
I mean, Patafan's always fun to watch, even when when he's not on the J, even when he's doing goofy stuff on Viper on Haven, right? Just a really fun player to watch. Tanny and I, both coming from Overwatch, have been aware of Patty for a pretty long time. Really, really talented player. And I think I mean, there's a lot of good teams at the event, but they got a rough group draw. Because there are a lot of, I mean, maybe not a lot of the teams that you favor to come out of the group, out of like other groups, for example, the expected 1 and 2 spots that, okay, X10's going to have a rough time with those. But if you look at the other teams that are fighting potentially for those 3rd and 4th spots in the group, X10 is competitive with a lot of them.
Yeah.
I don't think they're competitive with a Keyd Stars team, though. So to me, it seems pretty likely that X10 is going to be the team that goes out 0-2. I really don't see them making it out of this group, and I only expect them to even get that like elimination match win and get even just one BO3 if either Acend or Keyd is just somehow totally self-destructing. I really think all the matchups they have in this group are going to be pretty hard. So I do think they are going to come out with good energy and just wanting to leave it all on the stage and just do whatever they can do. So they'll play with no fear. So if one of these teams is like imploding and they're getting mad at each other and they're feeling nervous or whatever, then yes, they could absolutely get the upset. But it relies on, you know, those conditions of that team having a pretty severe issue, in my opinion.
And I think I remember too when they first started playing in their Reykjavik matchup. I forgot what team it was, but it did take a while on Icebox for Patty Pan to actually start getting some kills in, right, to warm up and be a little bit more comfortable, where eventually he ended up top fragging for the whole team. But I think that's the fun part of it too. This is also a roster that's already played in Iceland, that already has that LAN experience, that knows what it's like to play on that stage and what to expect going into the stage, because I don't think there should be that many changes in terms of like the table setting, the computer setting, the stage setting overall for X10. And we're seeing them over here where I think this one they actually did bid Full Sense, but in past tournaments, like even most recently, Full Sense was like on the comeback and on the high, I think, for Southeast Asia, and is probably that top team in Southeast Asia outside of Korea currently. So just looking at X10 into this matchup into Group A, what are your thoughts here, Tanny? If Patty Pan cannot be that type of person that we could rely on, especially when they was mentioned that he had some sort of wrist injury too, do we have anybody else on this roster that could actually step up to the game and help him out?
I'm not sure we do. I think they rely so heavily on Patty Pan for getting the openings. It's just their playstyle. It's how a lot of teams have played in the past as well. And unless something has drastically changed since Berlin, I don't think they've really, come up with a different playstyle for themselves. I'm not sure I agree that they are just a little bit unlucky with the group and that they could, maybe fight for the second spot in other groups. I think they're just like the clear weakest one here. I don't really see a chance of an upset, if I'm honest. And what I'm thinking is, like, if they were in the APAC qualifier, the last chance qualifier, would they have made it out? And I'm leaning towards probably no, based on like just how they play.
Even
that depends.
Yeah.
Does that mean Full Sense isn't in it? Like, because if Full Sense is in it, I feel like they probably don't win. But if Full Sense like had their spot, they could. I feel like they would have a good shot.
Really?
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, because I think for Full Sense, and once we'll get to them for sure, Full Sense in general, when you look at APAC, they looked decent, in my opinion, right? But I think it was more on the other teams. Like, Northeption, unfortunately, disappointed me. Newturn disappointed me. Damwon Kia disappointed me. Like, there was nobody that was really looking like you're looking, and I was going to bring that up because X10, the other thing too is that when they played in Iceland, they played against Fnatic, right? If I'm not mistaken, they had that experience versus playing against top teams where Fnatic was even at the top. So it's like, okay, we kind of know how other regions play now. We're able to get that practice in. Let's try to bring that style, and understanding how that style works from like other regions, and when the meta changes, we could try to maybe adapt, understanding how the regions currently played with the experience of us facing against them. You look at APAC, Newturn had the same thing, and it just didn't work out for them in the APAC qualifiers, in the Southeast Asia qualifiers, and I think that was just unfortunate to see how poorly these teams performed, unfortunately. And not to take anything away from Full Sense, they still look pretty decent. But even then, I for you to say that X10 is even or is weaker than Full Sense, I also think that's a close toss up. For you guys that say that Full Sense might still be able to win, I think it's still pretty even for those two teams together if they had to go into a head-to-head as like an elimination matchup where X10 could potentially take it. But we'll see what happens. I think again with that attitude from X10 to say, look, let's play freely, let's play carelessly, let's see what happens. I think that pressure off their shoulders into trying to perform well for Southeast Asia is gonna do them favors going into this tournament. But maybe not winning a BO3, maybe not even winning a map, I think, against these other three teams. But at least to make it fun and entertaining, I think, right? But speaking of fun and entertaining, we got to talk about El Diablo and Envy at this point. So I think going in this one, this team is my favorite to move forward into Group A and seed number 1. Of course, they're going to face off against X10. We talked about enough about X10 in general, so I don't think we need to talk about the preview of the matchup, but I'd rather talk about the team in itself. And also, like, when we actually start talking about this thing, we also necessarily have to talk about the coach, right? So the coach coming into this one, and I'm not going to be that, Mike's talked about it on Twitter saying, look, let's stop making it a cage fight between Chet and myself. Love the guy, love the team. It just didn't pan out, and it was Mike's decision. And I don't think that we actually had that deep enough conversation about Chet the last time we were together on the show, guys, because we talked about Raucus coming into their role, but we haven't had a chance to really talk about Chet. So I know I talked about it with Uber, and I think Mitchman was on that show too, and I was defending Chet as a coach going into Envy, and that it could still look pretty good. And I feel that Chet was in an unlucky position where when he started coaching for TSM, TSM was still looking for some sort of identity, and NRG were also looking for some sort of identity. Like, those two teams went through a lot of revolving doors to try to find like the right players to come in. Like, even Daps went back to Counter-Strike. But now that he's able to play in a team like, or coach, sorry, a team like Envy, where Envy seems to have a very, very solid team and core now, you don't have to go into the basics of like, okay, we just got to work out with communication. We just got to work out with how to trade off, how to space, how to scale. He could actually maybe get deeper into the playbook now that you have a really good team that he could coach. So what are your thoughts now on Chet, his potential now to be able to bring this team within like a month? Is it enough time? Is he going to change the playstyle of Envy drastically here, Tanny?
I mean, I hope he doesn't change the playstyle because that is like one of their strengths.
Yeah.
They have a really, really good playstyle. I hope he just brings something additional to the table to like elevate it, just that extra like 5-10% maybe to actually beat out the teams like Gambit. I think that's all that's needed of him, like more of a strategic coach, which is doing a bit of scouting, a bit more preparation for the team. I don't think he needs to come in here with new ideas and like completely change up how they play. Um, because they came second last time. They don't need
Yes.
to change it up that much.
Yeah. Do you think then, Dream, that Envy is kind of taking that pressure of like, as we talk about these storylines and trying to spice up the storylines and the Reddit detectives of pitting Chet and Mike's together, it's like, will Envy feel that pressure from the fans being like, oh shit, they're not going to perform that well because Mike's really changed them or whatnot, or are they going to be just fine?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that Envy is in a great position coming into this event. And I don't think that any sort of assumptions or rumors or narratives from the community around the coaching change is going to impact their mental or their approach really at all. Um, I just don't see that being as something that they're going to put a lot of focus on. They know how to focus on what's in front of them, and handle what they need to. I
Yeah.
do think that uh, Chet is like an extremely experienced coach with a
Mhm.
long history going back prior to Valorant, obviously,
Of course.
and just very well respected, very well liked, very uh, in demand amongst top teams, right?
Mhm.
And while some people have made points about him not having as much success on NRG or TSM, but like you said, those were some pretty difficult situations to tackle because of just the fit of players,
Yeah.
in my opinion. And
Mhm.
I don't think that it's a knock on him at all to not be able to like somehow like transcend all of those issues and snap his fingers and make all of that go away. And the fact that so many players just really want to work with him.
Mhm.
Um,
It
it's
tells a
just
lot about him.
yeah, and that's the kind of coach that you want at a big event like this. Like
Mhm.
someone that you everyone has a lot of trust and faith in, and they like feel like they're anything that's extra that they have to worry about, the
Mhm.
coach can just take care of as far as adjustments that they need to make, scouting that they need to do, stuff like that. That it just takes so much of that burden off of the players and off of FNS, and they can trust what Chet is going to bring.
Yeah.
Which just that's just exactly what you need to get that extra 5-10%. I do wonder how well Envy is going to adapt to a bunch of different play styles, because they were not really able to adapt to deal with Gambit's play style.
Yeah.
Like at all. It seemed like they did not adapt very much throughout the course of that series, and they didn't come in with uh, what looked like the right game plan in my eyes.
Mhm.
So I'm concerned about that, but that's hopefully what Chet will be able to bring,
I think
is to help
I think
them
so.
make those adaptations.
I
Yeah.
think, yeah, just going back to Chet's like previous teams, I think a lot of people think that the head coach has like all the power on the team. As we talked about last time, that when you come to these big orgs like TSM, NRG, the org actually does make the decisions on the players, sometimes
Correct.
before the
Correct.
coach
Yeah,
has
yeah.
anything to do with it. So like, say if you wanted to bench someone, it's not possible for him to just do that. So he's just stuck in the situation, which is, getting worse.
Of course. Of course.
Um, and I think people judge way too harshly on that, just based off just the results he got, because they don't know what internal stuff was going on the team. So it's really hard to tell.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with
Um,
that too. I agree with that too. And I think that if you're looking at a roster that looks complete, then I think, especially that what you were saying, Dream, that that Chet could be the type of person that's going to be able to like just study everybody else and really anti-strat. He'll come in with like a thick book and be able to help like look at this roster already. Like you don't really need to change any type of play style out of anybody else, and you could really focus just on okay, what are the tendencies of these teams where I could help out FNS to actually be able to do the job that Envy needs to do to win an event, right? Very similar to Raucus right now with Sentinels, actually, in my opinion.
mhm.
And even when you're looking at his tenure in CSGO, when he first started coaching Optic Gaming, that was a lot of players in their prime, right? You're looking at Rush, Tarek, I think it was Daps, Stanislaw, and Nafly, right? And Nafly was still an up-and-comer that people didn't know about yet. And he was still able to help them win E-League like Season 2, if I'm not mistaken. So with that, if you're looking at the roster we just saw, they are players that are in their prime in this game right now. Crashies, for a lot of people right now, is currently rated to be like a top 10 player going into Champions. You have Ye, of course, who's like a top 2 player rated going into Champions. You have Marv also, that's like a sleeper pick that's going to be able to be very impactful on this team. But then my question goes back as well into the secondary duelist. I think right now, do we feel that Victor has taken a little bit of a step back of potentially not necessarily having to be under that radar of that star fragger that they need. And is Victor playing his role well for the team so far?
I really like Victor on
Mhm.
Sky and on Duelist as well. Like
Mhm.
when we played against Envy in Berlin, everyone was hyping up Ye, you know, like, oh, he's insane, he's just
Yeah,
like
yeah,
a
yeah.
monster. But then when we actually scrimmed them, every single time we scrimmed them, it was Victor who was putting up the numbers, who was like getting those entries, getting the space, whatever was needed, and it was just insane. And I didn't like know much about him, especially because he changed his name, which I figured out later. But yeah, I didn't know like who he was at that
It was
point.
a sixth player. It was a sixth player.
Yeah, yeah, just some random guy in the server, coach playing. But yeah, his raise was just insane. Like again on
Yes.
Split, what he was doing on Split was so good, and
Mhm.
I think he's just such an underrated player because whenever you think of someone on Envy, you just instantly think Yay, or then
Mhm.
you think Crashies, and then this guy just goes completely under the radar.
Which is funny enough here, Dream, because back then, before he even joined the Envy roster, everybody was all about, hey, it's the duo, the package deal of Crashies and Food, aka Victor, at that point, right? So it's funny how that isn't a topic of conversation with him now in Envy.
Yeah, and it was always, them as a duo and them coming into Envy being like such an insane pickup, which that has borne out that it was like a really, really big pickup for them. Um, and I do think part of it is that Crashies is just continued to like improve a lot. And then Ye comes into the team and is a superstar jet player that is in some rounds like the center of what they're doing, and everything is just set Ye up and let him go do wild shit. And then some rounds it's literally just Ye is like, I'm just gonna go do my own thing, T side hopping on the other side of the map, you guys figure out what you want to do.
Yeah.
And he just has a read and just walks into a site with his op and gets a kill and
Yeah.
then opens up the round, right? So Ye has a lot of that flexibility or playing based on feel or playing based on reads. And Victor gives that stability where he can be the character that is good at setting up Ye on these more set piece type plays, but he's also good at being the entry and entering for himself when Ye is off doing his own thing and
Yeah.
making his own play, right?
Yeah.
So
sorry, go ahead. Continue, please.
yeah,
Finish it off.
I was just gonna say that I do think that him being asked to like branch out and play a few different styles does seem to have made him just not as strong on like the really aggressive kinds of plays. Like obviously we remember him like playing Phoenix, right, and just
Yes.
going nuts.
Yes. Farming 6 orbs and kills and getting ults every 2 rounds. It was fucking insane.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. So is he like doing those things right now? No, but I would argue that the way that this roster is built, he's actually having more impact now because he can do whatever they need, especially on a character like Sky. He is very, very good. Like Envy is one of the best teams at abusing the double info comp in general, but a huge part of that is Victor on Sky and his ability to do all of the different jobs that Sky can do. Instead of being just insane at one, like being amazing at anti-lurk or being amazing at getting perfect info timings or being amazing at flash entering. He's just like, instead of a 10 out of 10 at one of them, he's like a 9 out of 10 at all of them, right?
That just makes me think that I can't wait to see Victor playing some KO going into Champions at this point now. Just because after what Zeppa's been displaying during LCQ, maybe some teams are going to start seeing that value of what KO brings. It's still lots of pros on both ends between a KO and a Sky. But if I get to see Victor on a fucking KO, I'm going to go fucking ape shit. It's going to be awesome. Last but not least, before we get into predictions as well, is just talking about the strats, right? What they're able to do. I think, Dream, you were saying at the same time that they had a hard time figuring out how Gambit played And that's how they kind of like lost their series in the grand finals. But I also think they're also a team that's very good to be prepared even before Chet joined, because when they decide to play Haven versus Sentinels, that was like a fucking great game from Envy, because it's not only Ye getting the entries, but it's also this double lurk that somehow you have FNS and I even think Marved able to be in the back lines of Haven against Sentinels on their home map, where we know Sentinels to be very good on. So I think they're very good in terms of like understanding the playstyle and anti-stratting, but maybe because Gambit style of like how Nats was just fucking insane and Defo is insane, they're just hard to adapt to that fast, and just the shots weren't landing into that tournament. So it brings me now to the predictions, and I want to call out to action for the chat, actually. I want to thank everybody that's hanging out so far. We get a high number of people hanging out so far in the chat, so welcome, welcome. We're actually going to ask you guys to vote. Who you think are going to be the top 2 teams that are going to make it out of group. I think you could vote twice, if I'm not mistaken. So make sure that you vote 2 teams by typing 1, 2, 3, or 4. And you do one at a time, right? So you do 1 enter, 2 enter, and not like 1, 2, and then 1, 4. And then we'll see who are the 2 teams that are going to make it out of group. Let's go from top to bottom here. Tanny, who do you think are the 2 teams making it out of group in Group A?
I think Envy should definitely be first, and then Acend in the lower bracket.
Envy first, Ascend lower bracket. I agree with that. I think that's going to be pretty even, pretty secured at that point too. But there are some scrim bucks that are going out here that shows how maybe Ascend hasn't been looking too hot. Vivo Keyd's been looking a little bit better, and that potentially Vivo Keyd could upset Ascend twice. Do you see this happening, Dream, or it's still going to be Ascend and Envy?
I mean, I definitely expect Envy first, Ascend second. That's absolutely my read. But I could see a world where Ascend loses to Envy in uppers, and then kind of gets down on themselves or has some negative momentum, feels that pressure with their back against the wall. If Vivo Keyd just is in the zone and is just shutting down their individual playmaking. It's just so hard to do that for 2 maps. Just consistently shut down and outmech Ascend. That is very difficult. So it's a high task, but there is definitely the potential there. There's 3 absolute mechanical talents on Vivo Keyd that can show up, right? So it's definitely doable, but I would definitely put my money on Ascend making it in the 2nd seed over Vivo Keyd.
And mind you, if you guys want to put your votes in, you could also do like a space in between, right? So if you want to vote for 2 teams, it could be 1 space 2, 1 enter, 2 enter, or that's it. Those are the only combinations that you could do, right? So, or you put a space between, or you just put 1 or 2. So Envy and Ascent, I think I agree with you guys too. I think it's going to be pretty even at that point. When we looked back at the polls, I was like, who the hell voted for X10, right? We only have 1 person so far in the votes that actually supported that, and that's going to be our producer Ian. So he's off the group. So yeah, I don't think that's going to happen, but always happy to be proven wrong. But I think we're pretty even here to say that Envy and Ascent will be moving forward. Although, despite us saying and people talking about how potentially it could be close between Ascent and Vivo Keyd, the majority of the chat voting in here do believe into Ascent as that 2nd pick moving forward. But a vast majority here into Envy moving forward. So that's I think that's nothing out of the ordinary. I think we're good to move on into Group B now, and to bring in a special guest for Group B, it's gonna be Chris Stream. Welcome, man.
Whoa! Nice Thanks for having me, guys. I'm so happy to be here.
Good to have you, brother. But yeah, let's just go ahead and talk about Group B. I think for me though, here, guys, is definitely that group of death. Maybe not group of death. I think it's gonna be the hottest group to look out for, actually, to see the Sentinels versus Liquid potentially in the upper bracket Group B. Tanny, first thoughts just looking at this group.
I don't agree that it's still like the group of death. But I think the Sentinels versus Liquid matchup is probably going to be one of the best games in this
Group
tournament.
Stages. Fucking group stages.
Yeah,
this is potential grand finals and group stages.
Yeah. This is a potential finals matchup. Yeah.
Yeah. So I like Liquid, as I said, have been looking insane in form. They've just been so good, and Sliggy's been bringing new stuff to the table as
Dude.
well. Nivera's been taking it on. They have the firepower strats, like everything they need to succeed here.
Yeah, that's
Um,
amazing. That's amazing.
and Sentinels, they've just fixed everything. I think, like from
Have they
Berlin,
really though?
like they knew their mistakes, they fixed
Mhm.
them, and they're just looking just as good as they were in Reykjavik now.
Okay, so they knew their mistakes, and they fixed them. But do we know really if Sentinels have fixed it so far, right? So let's bring up the roster to check it out. I mean, this needs no introduction. It's the same fire that we know and love ever since Tens was the latest addition joining this roster, and of course they have Raucus now joining in as a coach. So let's revisit that real quick, though. As we talked about it before, Raucus adds the brain power, as you could see here, into the Sentinels. But with the conversation that he had with other people in the past, he was saying, or in past interviews, he was also saying how, you know, his goal is not really to revamp how the Sentinels kind of play, but he's also the type of person that could nerd it out and wants to find ways to mold his opponents, in a sense that if there's any type of like weird tech that he could do that could just throw players off guard and just tilt the team off the server for the whole game, then he's going to try to implement that for FaZe. And I feel that he might bring in that same type of mentality to say, this could actually be doable, where maybe it doesn't work with FaZe, but it may work with Sentinels. And now with that, Raucus coming in, and I did like a lot of like top 16 rankings. There's one that just came out on Reddit right now with a huge panel. Everybody's putting Sentinels as like not even in the top 3. So, Chris, what do you think about this? I still have Sentinels potentially even winning this tournament.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think Sentinels are in the running and should be considered like one of your potential like top 4 or grand finalist teams, right? I think it's really hard to say who's going to win, but they are definitely up there. I mean, obviously, I think Liquid is also on that list, which is what's so great about them being in the same group and us getting this
taste.
Yeah, this preview early on. But a really big part of that actually is, so in the first 2 international events, right, in Iceland and in Berlin, there really was like people came in with their different takes or their different ideas on the game, and it very quickly became clear what the best meta of the tournament, of the event was, what the best compositions were, what the best play style was, right? And that was heavy util combos, lots of Astra usage, and very fast retake, fast rotation style in Iceland. And then in Berlin, much more emphasis on being able to play slow and play lurky and trade 1-for-1 with your utility and play a much more methodical style, right? So we are going to see a clash of styles here. And it is going to tell us a lot about what the overall tournament meta is going to be. Because Liquid does play very slow a lot of the time, double opping on defense, opping, like Sova opping on T side, or KJ opping on T side, and playing really slow, lurking to get like pushed up. Late in the round, the other team is run out of util, so they have to peek something with their face, and there's just a op there because it's Liquid. Of course, there's a op there. So that is a style that works very well against slow-paced teams, right? That they do want to trade util out. That's when ops are really good, right?
Correct.
That is not how Sentinels has traditionally played, right? They're a team that will slow default, but they aren't a team that's going to drag it down to the last 35, 40 seconds of the round on T side. And they're very willing to play extremely aggressively on their defenses, right? So it's going to tell us a lot about what the overall meta and what other teams are going to start adjusting to, right? Teams are going to see who's winning these matches and do those adjustments. That's exactly what we've seen in these last 2 international events. It's not going to be any different for this one. So not only is this a clash of titans at the event, but the play style clash is also going to point to a lot of what we're going to see in the bracket stage as well.
I think you bring up a good point in that in terms of playstyles, right? Because I was gonna ask the playstyles of Sentinels, but let's talk about it a little bit of how Sentinels may look into a playstyle of Liquid. Because if Liquid, and I'm gonna throw this question to you after Tanny, but when we first looked at Valorant when it first came out, there was at some point in time in the beta days during Ignition series that the double op meta did come out, or at least was tested out, right? But then it was realized that it doesn't really work when you're always playing these set plays. But then when you look at how the game's currently being played with this current meta in terms of playstyle, not only agent composition, is how you're able to pull rotations out and how important the Sova is to help in terms of like pulling these rotations. If it's like a recon dart towards one side, let's take Icebox for example. Recon dart towards one side, you fight out, you get a couple of kills, you pull a rotation out, you default back into B, I'll drone out into B main, let's say if there's a Viper's Pit or anybody playing towards B side, and then once you push to yellow, oh fuck it, let's go back to the A side, then we plant that side, then it's just becoming like less utility, you only have the recon dart that's back, and then you just fight for trades where Sentinels are going to be very good against. But what's your thought about double op coming potentially back into the meta that might be underlined by Liquid now? Because if you're trying to go back and forth and trying to pull rotations and you're running out of utility to go back into the other side for a second re-hit, then that's where it gets troublesome when you have to face against two ops.
I mean, yeah, the retake issue is definitely an issue with the double orb. Like if you
That's
leave
another
one
thing.
on, yeah, if you leave one on either side of the map and then you just have one person just has to retake with an orb, it makes it so much harder. But I think the biggest issue is just the economy. It is such a momentum-based thing to pick up the double orb. If you're like trading rounds even, you just won't be able to get it. And if you do and you lose that round, that's it. That's like your economy gone for the next like 4 rounds. Um, so that's why a lot of teams just don't pick it up that much, because even like one orb is it hurts the economy a lot. And there was a time on Heretics when Nuki only picked up the orb when it was dropped by the enemy team, and he would just pick it up that way. He would never buy it himself. Um,
Well, it was
so
also
yeah,
like 5K back then, right?
Yeah.
If I'm
yeah,
not
exactly.
mistaken.
It was
Yeah.
more expensive.
Yeah.
Now it's like a little bit more viable, but I think the double up is still. I'm a bit iffy about it, especially since if you're gonna do it, I would want one of them to at least be on the jet, which just isn't. Like
That's true.
Extreme just can't
That's
play the
true.
AWP, right?
Yeah.
So it's a bit weird to see for sure. It would have been cool to see Chamber
Yeah.
in Champions, because I'm
Yeah.
sure they would have 100% picked this just so they could have the ult.
Oh
And
yeah.
use that as a second ult. But
Agreed.
yeah, I don't know what Liquid are gonna do, because they're a team which switch up how they play and what they play every tournament.
Yeah.
And going
Yeah.
into Champions, you can be sure they are not going to play anything the same that they did in last chance qualifier.
Yeah.
It's going to be completely different. They're going to come up with all new stuff, and it just kind of depends how that will work out for them,
Yeah.
Because sometimes it doesn't work out that well. Like there was
Yeah.
a time when they were trying out the Yoru, and it just was failing in EU. I think that's one of the reasons they didn't make like Masters Berlin, just because they were just experimenting a bit too much, and they lost the games where it actually mattered to make it through at that point.
Yeah, and at least it goes back to like seeing how Liquid was like really put down to like this human form of like they're just always beatable. It seems as though maybe even Sentinels going into this tournament could have that same view right now going into Champions though, right? And is it fair right now, Dream, that we're putting Sentinels that low? Because if you look at everybody else that's currently predicting players in the top 20, predicting teams in the top 3 or whatnot, or just a team winning Champions overall, is that everybody's really high on the horse of Gambit so far, which is definitely justifiable for sure. But are we already discrediting Sentinel's potential to come back after not making it out of like a far run into Berlin at Masters 3?
I mean, I think that you have to look at that roster and understand the peaks that they can reach, and then look at what they were able to do earlier this year, and that has to be respected and talked about. But I don't think it's unreasonable to have them outside of your top three. I think people that like have them like sixth or something is like that's wild to me. I mean, I personally I would probably have them third. But it's just really hard to say because
Yeah.
we haven't seen them play
Exactly.
since since Berlin. So
Yeah.
it's really hard to say how much they've changed. We've got some rumors, right, about Shaz not playing the Jet at all anymore and it being
Yep.
10's full
10's full time. Yep.
which sounds pretty good to me. No disrespect to Shaz's Jet Op at all, but I think having the same Jet Op makes it a lot easier for the supporting cast to be able to play around it because you just know how they want to play.
And sorry, just to add on to that too, like if Tens is going to be like main jet opping at 100% of the time, then maybe it becomes an insta bend thinking about Sentinels map rotation to just get rid of Split, right? So that Shazam could maybe stay into an agent that could keep playing as a Sova and not be caught into like having the IGL raise on a map like Split, right? So getting rid of that could maybe help too.
I think they do play Split and Shaz plays Sky. Is what I heard. So
nice.
I mean, we'll see if they ban it. But I think he was talking about it and said that he plays Sky on that map. So I mean, we'll see. I do think that some of Liquid's interesting maps, like Breeze, for example, which is one of the maps that they do like to double up, where it's a little easier because you can like pick up the T people that are buying ops because almost every team also buys a T side up there. So it helps the economy a little bit. You just pass the ops back and forth. But I think that will be a great map if that makes it into the pool. I'd be really interested to see if Sentinels wants to play Bind with these like slight role swaps and what Sick would be doing on that map, because I think Liquid has shown some different looks on Bind recently. I'm not really a fan of how they play the Jet KO comp on that map, honestly. And I think that Sentinels, even though Bind has never been in their huge comfort zone, I would be happy playing against that comp. So yeah, I think there's a lot of like map specific matchup stuff that could be very, very interesting. And a lot of that has to do with Sentinels having some role swap stuff going on and Liquid having some pretty unique looks on some of these maps and changing them a lot. So I mean, we saw Sentinels last event have a different comp on Split for different opponents. I could see them and Liquid both doing that, where they have like comps they play in their first round, and then they play the same maps and they're playing different comps. I could absolutely see that happening.
Yeah, even for Sentinels in the end too, people say we haven't seen him play since Masters 3 in Berlin. I like to say we haven't seen him play since Iceland, Reykjavik, because when you look at Berlin, they just use the same fucking shit, right? It was the same comp, the same style. That's how they got read so well by G2 on Icebox. It was just like a good tournament for them to be like, okay, let's just figure out how these teams are currently evolving in the meta and how they're currently playing it, and then we're going to prepare for champions instead. So when they got owned by Nuki on G2, by G2 on Icebox on a 2v1 on A side, it just shows that G2 were prepared for that specific playstyle for Sentinels. So now you take an extra like month and a half to develop what you have for G2 for Sentinels now in champions. Great shit, so I'm expected high hopes right now for Sentinels. And we all talked about Liquid at this point. So let's head on over and talk to Liquid now. And Liquid is going to be, of course, one of the top teams to look out for outside of the Gambit, Sentinels, Envy, and Cloud9 in my eyes, because they're a team that hasn't lost, right, since they got this brother buff. As you see this this video of Nivera coming in, playing with his brother
instead of Valorant.
Exactly. It's like, hey, welcome. Nivera is like, okay, I come from CS. My brother comes from CS. He's known for the one taps. Let's see what we could bring here for Liquid in Valorant. Nivera gets a fucking pistol ace in his first career match in Valorant, and now Liquid has been unstoppable since. Now, before talking about like the whole weaknesses of Liquid so far, let's just look at Liquid overall. So starting with you here, Tanny, your thoughts and looks of TL since Nivera joined this roster.
I mean, I think it's exactly what they needed. Cryptics just wasn't good enough for this team at that point. Like, they needed the extra firepower, they needed the extra reads on the game that Nivera now has. It's actually amazing that this guy just started playing the game and he already sees it in the same way that someone who's been playing since beta, you know?
Yeah.
It's he's so quick at learning, and I think it's exactly what they needed going into Champions, or into LCQ rather.
Yeah.
I get there was a bit of like a honeymoon period for the roster, which is why they absolutely just destroyed everyone in LCQ. But I actually expect them to carry that form into Champions as well.
Yeah.
I don't think they'll go much further down than that. They have the LAN experience from the people in CS and even the people just from Reykjavik. They're a team which always just keeps their like calm under pressure as well. So I don't think they'll be phased being in a group with Sentinels or Kru or anyone, you know.
Yeah.
The only thing that I see being a little bit of a problem is this news that's come out today.
Let's do it.
About Nivera being like testing positive for COVID, which might.
Yeah, so let's clear the air of what's going on here with this whole COVID stuff in Nivera. So apparently Nivera, if I'm not mistaken with my sources or just reading what Upcomer George has been doing and what Scream's currently seeing here, is contracted COVID about 3 weeks or so before Champions or whatnot, right? And he's been okay, hasn't been sick at all, and then did a PCR test, and the PCR test maybe showed some residues of like the old sickness that he just got the weeks prior, right? So he's still okay, he's not feeling sick, and he's still good to go into play. So this actually official ruling came out from Riot today, roughly about 3-4 hours ago, that, you know, despite Nivera still in a good spot and feeling in tip-top form, just to take extra measures, we want to make sure that we protect everybody, right? Not only the players, but staff, production, everybody that's in Berlin, period. So what should potentially happen here now is that they have like these quarantine zones where the players will now be playing from the practice areas in the quarantine zones, but Nivera will also be on a separate in a separate location, isolated from everybody else. So the good part about this, at least, is that I think in that release that came out from Riot, it said that they're playing on LAN servers still, right? So that's the good part. It's not going to be a fake LAN slash that we got at LCQ NA. People should be playing at 0 ping at this point. So maybe a weakness is like, okay, Nivera, I was going to talk about that. Maybe the weakness right now for Liquid is that Nivera is not going to be able to be with his teammates at the same table. But at least they're still going to be playing on LAN where communication and whatnot, if they play the same way that they played online, they should still be fine here, Chris.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, a lot of those online matches that they were playing, they're obviously sitting next to each other. You know, they can look at each other's screens, feel the vibes, which like legitimately makes a big difference, right? So him not being there is a handicap. I do not think it is enough of a handicap to stop them from getting out of groups. And from what some of the Liquid people have been tweeting, there's a hope that this won't be necessary for the entire event, and that they might be able to play on stage in later matches. We'll see. But I mean, I think that Nivera has been an amazing addition to this team. Was he playing the LCQ with COVID? Like, did that happen?
Possibly.
I don't know how the dates work out, but if that's the case, that's also nuts.
I mean, 3 weeks ago, I
so
don't think he was playing LCQ 3 weeks ago.
oh, was it
Yeah,
4
might
weeks
have
ago?
just finished.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it was a bit
Okay,
longer ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, maybe yeah. So, but I do think it's been a really big addition to the team. I do think that the biggest thing that I'm concerned about is that there are days where Sulcus or Yampy will just be invisible for one map. They usually don't have like a terrible day or even a terrible BO3, but there will be just one map in their BO3 that they have a rough time. And the question is that enough of a weakness for some of these other teams that are looking like their top 4 caliber? Are they going to be able to exploit that? Is that going to be enough of a difference maker? Because everyone on the team is also a playmaker, right? And they can make the plays to make up for sometimes when their teammates aren't totally in it.
Yeah.
So it that's really the only thing that I could see happening that would keep them out of top 4 in this bracket, in my opinion. Like, I really have high expectations for Liquid. I think they're a very good team, and I think that we should be surprised if they aren't making it pretty deep.
Yeah. And the tough part, though, is that we're all on this hopium/copium for TL because every single international tournament that they played at, we always said that, you know, they should be the team that's going to be making it at least out of qualifiers, even then, where they couldn't even qualify to some events, too. Or going into Reykjavik, we thought they were going to be like the top team, even rated above Fnatic, to actually maybe even win Reykjavik at that point. And unfortunately, that fell kind of short, too. But also one more thing, as you were talking about here, Chris, about Nivera potentially playing back on stage, is that Riot currently in Berlin, the COVID protocols right now for all the player, staff, and talent is that they have to go through a rapid antigen test every single morning. So, Chad, if you're unaware of that, it's just like on the day of every morning. I've done it myself too. Is that you get yourself tested where you have medical staff that are qualified on spot, and they check your nostril. You have to wait into a secluded room. And then the results come out within 30-45 minutes to know if you have contracted COVID in a previous day, right? And then the PCR test is a little bit more at length, that it's done. It takes 24 hours or so to get the results, but it goes deeper into analyzing any type of like extra residue or anything at all that you may have COVID, which is why potentially you caught Nivera's old residue stuff. And they have to do that test every 3 days now, which is bi-weekly. And we didn't have to do it at LCQ, but I have to do it flying back to Canada. So it's more accurate in that sense too. So if it comes to show that in the next time that they do the PCR test, if Nivera is good, then we'll see him on stage. But at least like in the first few days right now, day 1 and day 2, potentially it's going to be still in isolated areas. So wanted to clarify that. And let's continue on now with Liquid here too. So we talked about Nivera. We talked about how good they look. We talked about the double op potential setup that we kind of have here for Team Liquid as potentially a new meta for this team moving into Champions. Now, Tani, what are your thoughts as well on Scream going back as potentially a full-time Jet? Not opping a lot though, right? He's doing a lot of rifling as a Jet instead. You're shaking your head. I don't know if you're like, oh fuck, he should be opping instead, but I still think it looks pretty good, right?
He's not opping, is why I'm shaking my head for.
But he still looks pretty good as rifling as a Jet though.
Yeah, I think it's fine. Like, him on Jet and Reyna is absolutely what you want to see Scream on. It's what he's done best on. It's his best agents by far. And he's one of the people you can absolutely count on to put up the numbers, like, even without AWPing. I really like that they've moved past the Scream Go Kill tactic.
Yep.
Because that's what they were stuck on for a long time with Scream on the Jet. But now he's still an entry, but he's not an entry in the same way as he was before, where everyone was using their utility simply for him to try and get the kills. Right now, he's kind of working a bit more on his own, and the other team's using their utility to actually win the round instead of just trying to help him get those initial picks. Yeah, I absolutely love to see him back on the Jet. It sucks playing against him on the Jet, I will say, because you just see him dash into your face, get
Yeah.
like 3 kills and dash out, and you're like, what just happened at the start of this round? But you know, it's good representation for EMEA going
Oh
into
yeah.
this.
It definitely feels like the old, like, they know me for my one taps, kind of like crosshair placement off angles definitely pays off even more in this type of style with Jet, right? Because now even if he misses, he could still just dash away and readjust and really tap the way that he does and aims the way that he does. I think this has been a great change for Scream, which seems to have elevated Liquid overall. But then you're looking at it originally when his roster was first formed before Nivera even joined, and we still had Soulcaz in there. We were looking at Eccles in here in the roster. We were thinking about Yampi, right? Yampi was supposed to be that jet that's going to come in because he had so much potential coming in from Counter-Strike as like the up and comer in the Finnish scene before this whole hiatus of like this ban from VAC or whatever happened. So that said, Chris, what are your thoughts looking at Yampi now taking a seat back and being more of an IGL role for the team?
I think he's grown into the role super well. I do think there's still one map where they're playing him on Jet, where they play Jet Reyna, maybe Ascent, I think. So it's cool that he still gets to flex that because he still looks really good on it, which is just, really entertaining to see. And it also kind of gives you insight, like when you're an IGL and you know what it's like to entry, right? It helps you like understand how important certain pieces of util getting forced out or getting maintained on your own side can be, right? And helps you make those good mid-round decisions because you understand what it's like to also be in the thick of it. So I think that's a really important part of it. But I mean, it's just clear that it took him a little bit to get adjusted, and he's a lot more comfortable. And you see a lot less of those times where his like timing is super off or he's out of sync with his team, where it's obvious that he was calming something or trying to figure something out, and he wasn't able to just purely focus on his movement, his timing, his crosshair. And he's gotten to the point where a lot of those things can happen just purely automatically for him. And he's making those same aggressive moves and still taking fights, not being afraid, opping on off angles without a dash, and doing some really aggressive stuff, but still piloting the team in a really good way. So I think that some of that is probably Nivera coming in as well, just having a really good mind for the game and being able to be like, I have this area of the map locked down. Like, I know what the fuck is going on over here. And like, if anything changes, you will definitely know, but I am running this, right?
Yeah.
And that takes a little bit of that pressure off as well, because he's so good at locking stuff down on CT as well as being the anchor or the lurk on T side. So I think that definitely plays into it, but I don't know. I personally like seeing Yampi on that IGL role because he can still frag out and he can still op on like weird characters and make big plays. So we don't lose that element. And then we still get to have Scream running it down on Jet.
Definitely started showing that too when he was playing op on even Killjoy back then. But go ahead, sorry, Tani.
Yeah, I'm actually not that big of a fan of him on the Jet. The way he plays Jet always just seems like there's a huge disconnect with the team. Like before Nevera joined, he was playing Jet on almost all the maps on in like Stage 3, and it got to the point where it was just so predictable what he was going to do. He was just going to smoke onto side, dash into it, his team would be somewhere behind, and it would almost always be a free pick for the team, for the opposing team. So yeah, I'm still not convinced on his Jet. I don't know if that was just because he was having to do that IGL role while being the entry, which is not an easy task, honestly. Like I'm surprised people like Shazam managed to actually do it for so long. Although, as you said, it might have changed now. But yeah, like I like to see him more on the passive like Sova role. where he can control the flow of the team instead of being the one to just dash in and make the plays himself.
Awesome. Yeah, so we'll definitely have to see. I think this is going to be Liquid looking at its best form, at their best form going into the tournament. Again, I think anything short to top 3 would probably be a disappointment here for me as a Liquid fan, but maybe even less than that for Liquid. They probably won it all, especially if they haven't lost a single map or a single series, going into Nivera joining in, then you're definitely walking in with this high, right? That you could actually win it all and anything less than that is just gonna hurt them a lot. So we hope for the best for Liquid. But for 2 other teams that we're hoping for the best, where potentially it might not be the best, unfortunately, for these teams, right? I think we're hearing a lot through the grapevines that the Scrimbucks for Furia hasn't been looking the best at all, where it goes back to that storyline of, unfortunately, for Brazilian teams into the international stage, just seems to have a drop-off when it looks so good in their own region. So let's talk about this this Furia roster in the end. Like, what are their chances? How do they look? I think, for me, looking at Furia into the last chance, or just into their matches, in general, I think Zen was probably the one that stepped up to the place the most for me in terms of what he was able to enable as the Jet for the team, which is why I have him highly rated into my personal top 20, because he looked quite impressive going into those matches. But overall, well, what can you guys think here for Furia? What are their chances? Can they upset at least a map? Can they make this competitive? What are your thoughts here, Tanny?
Honestly, I don't know that much about this team. I didn't watch Last Chance qualifier for South America. It's the only one I didn't actually watch. I'm not expecting too much from them, just because I didn't expect much from like Haven Liberty coming into Masters 3 either. Vivo Keyd was actually a surprise that they managed to do that well, in my opinion. I'm actually expecting more from Vikings than from these guys, even though Vikings, haven't shown that much recently. Um, it's just a bit of a weird team, because when you think of the Brazilian scene, there aren't any like star players on this team. The same you have with the other ones. So I don't know if it's just because they're a more cohesive team where everyone's pulling their own weight, or if it's just because they simply don't have any. And if they don't, then they come to lack a bit of firepower in champions, I think.
Chris, is it lacking right now for Furia? Do we have any like light at the end of the tunnel outside of, again, like I said, I think Zen was so I think what I watched was them versus Australs, and now it's ex Australs after that into the South American qualifiers. So
hilarious name.
Yeah. Yeah, man. So what are your thoughts on Furia moving forward into this tournament?
I would say the only light at the end of the tunnel is the tunnel to their boarding gate, bro. This is a rip. Unfortunately, I think this is going to be one of the teams that performs the worst overall at this event, and they are in a very top-heavy group. With, like we said, 2 potential finalists in their group, so there's just no way that they are getting out of the group. We'll talk about Kru in a minute, but I actually like Kru a pretty decent amount. I don't think there's a lot to talk about with this team. Zand is sort of like the centerpiece Jet player.
Yep.
But he's just not on the caliber of the Jets at this event. He's just not going to keep up. I don't know what else to say. This team has been stuck at like the 3rd to 4th to 5th like area in Brazil for most of this year, and have never really been able to like push past that or look like they were ever fighting to be the best team in Brazil. They had an interesting road through LCQ to get here, but yeah, I don't know, man. This is just one of those teams that hopefully they can get 10 rounds on both maps like that. It's like that.
I just hope that we're gonna have like content creators or whatnot getting all these clips on Valoranting once Furia makes it into the top 3, and then they do a compilation and all these memes about how we're predicting the Furia.
Bro, if Furia gets top 3, I'll get a tattoo.
I want to see it. I want to see it. Furia.
I
Bring
will
it.
do it.
Bring
dude.
it.
It's a safe bet.
Yeah, exactly. That's yeah.
We'll see. We'll see. Well, at least you mentioned Kru, so we could definitely talk about Kru right now then, because we're wishing the best of Furia, but definitely I do agree their chances are quite slim going into this group. But Kru, for me, Kesnet for sure, like one of those players to look out for. One of those players that has always been doing very well, very humble too. We've seen all these videos between Kesnet and even Mixwell going into Masters 3. So I like what I've been watching from Kru so far. I think. Going back from Reykjavik, they were the team that were able to win pistol rounds, right? That was pretty much it. And then trying to follow this meta of okay, let's try to incorporate a Viper. Let's try to incorporate this. It shows that they've been in the lab, right? Watching how European teams play, how NA teams play. But then, unfortunately, when it comes down to the whole execution to play that type of style, that's where it differs, right? Because you can have all the pieces right to try to follow that meta, but if you're not playing it the way it's meant to be played, if you're not you have to understand the timings of your opponents too, if you're going to try to follow that type of composition, that type of meta, and it seems as though they were lacking behind. But then at least in Berlin, it looked a little bit better, right? I think getting a win over, if I'm not mistaken, it was Crazy Raccoon. It was kind of nice. But even they had to play against G2 as well, where G2 got 4th. So they didn't have an easy run. They had to play against Envy on top of that, who got 2nd, right? I think I mentioned that before.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not they didn't get the best case scenarios in terms of the matches, but I don't know if this is going to be like the dark horse team. And Chris, you mentioned that you like Kru a little bit more, so tell me, do they have this dark horse potential?
Yeah, I mean, I think they do. I think that this, to me, is like, it's unfortunate that they're in this group, because it is just, again, 2 potential finalists here. But I think Kru is actually a really good team, and that both Liquid and Sentinels aren't, like, they should not be going into these matches thinking they're going to be able to hide strats and get away with it. They might not be forced to show everything, but they're gonna have to actually come out and play to beat this team. I think that, I mean, you mentioned Kesnet. I think that this team really lives and dies by his performance. Even though he's not the star Jet player, he's like the 2nd duelist, or sometimes the Raze player on some maps, or like the Sky, like Flex. He plays a lot of different things for the team on different maps, but he really is like the most important piece of this team. If he is having a good game, they can win. If he is having a bad game, they are going to struggle extremely, extremely hard. I've been hearing good things, that people have been very impressed with him in scrims. So that sounds good. That sounds like he's in good form and that he might be able to show that. But he definitely has maps, particularly on Sky, where just out of nowhere, his performance will be a lot lower than it was even on Sky, the map before, where there's just something about it that was the case in Berlin. That was the case qualifying for Berlin. There's been plenty of time since then. This is another team that we have seen very, very little of since Berlin. So there's a bunch of changes that could have been made. I'm pretty sure that Kru was one of the teams that was playing Sky prior to like Berlin. It's not like Kesnet was, totally new to the agent, but it definitely wasn't in his comfort zone. I feel like with a couple months of being able to play Sky, where the double info meta has been pretty strict on a lot of maps, if he does have that comfort up, I'm looking at him as being like a Stax-esque level initiator player and 2nd duelist. This guy is the real deal.
Just no breach right now, though, as Stax would, right? I do believe that. I do believe that he's the real deal. I think you're nodding to that as well, Tanny. And the thing that I laughed about the most was listening to the Plat Chat boys and the scrim bucks, and what they've been hearing is that, have you heard about this guy? Kesnet. That's the next simple. which I think now we're going a little bit too far ahead of ourselves. But your thoughts here, Tanny, because you seem to agree that it's all about an all around Kesnet too.
I don't think it's all around him. I like the whole team, to be honest. Especially like Klaus, just because I know him from Overwatch as well.
Yeah.
But this team, it's a bit weird because when Reykjavik came along, they were destroying everyone in scrim. They were doing super well versus the top teams. Everyone was like, "Yeah, this is gonna go so well for them. You know, they're gonna be like top 4 team here." You can probably pull up my power rankings from back then. It would have them up there. And then Masters 3 came along, and whenever we scrimmed them, they did super well again.
Mm-hmm.
But then at both of those events, when they actually get onto stage, they just don't seem to have anywhere near the same performance. And they don't even seem to be playing the same way at all. They seem like so much more structured in scrims. And I don't know if it's land nerves or if it's inexperience or whatever it may be, but it just looks like a different team when it gets onto stage.
Mm-hmm.
And if they've gotten over that after playing like now 2 very big tournaments, I think that can help a lot, and they can actually do a little bit of damage in this group. I don't think they have a chance of making it out, just because Sentinels and Liquid are here.
That's true.
But I expect some close matches if they've gotten over that. If they haven't, I think this is just going to be like a walkover for the other teams.
Well, it then comes down to predictions in chat. Let us know what you think. Who are the top 2 teams that are going to make it out of the group in Group B? Same thing as before. All you got to do is put in chat number 1 or number 2 or number 3 or number 4. You could vote twice, so you could do it that way, or you could just put 1 space 3, 1 space 4, 2 space 4, etc. But just don't glue them together and don't put any commas in between. So let us know what you think. I think it's a done deal for me to think about that it's going to be Sentinels and Liquid moving through, but it then comes down to who's coming out at number 1 seed, who's coming out at number 2 seed, and seeding does matter at this point as well. Just want to let you know, chat, and just want to let you guys know, of course, you guys know, Tanny and Chris, because when it comes down to getting like the number 2 seed, if you have to play against the number 1 seed, and understanding how this usually works in GSL single elimination, usually it's like A1, C2, A2, C1. So they'll mix up A and C groups together, B and D. That could be the possibility, but I'm not too sure yet. Unless
I think it'll just be a.
I think it's just kind of a draw.
Pick.
It's a draw after.
Draw,
Okay. So at least it's that. At least it's that with number 1 and number 2 seeds. So thankfully there's that randomness going through. But there's still a potential where, you know, if Sentinels get second place, they could still have to play against Gambit in the quarterfinals matches, which would be friggin' insane looking at the playoffs overall. And actually, while the votes are still going through, I want to know you guys' thoughts. What do you think about the format overall? Having to go GSL style in groups and single elimination into playoffs.
Reasonable.
Yeah.
I think it's okay. I would have really liked a double LM playoff stage. Or like some form of, you know, like Swiss format for the group stage where you have more than just 2 matchups. Like you lose 2 best of 3s, you're just gone, right?
Yeah.
Pack your bags. But it does suck a bit, especially if you have to like quarantine for ages.
Yeah.
You have that extra pressure going into your elimination match that, you know, this is only our second match here, but if we lose it, we're just gone. It was all for nothing.
So
I would have liked to see more matches come out.
Yeah, it just drags it out a bit too, right? You're taking away like the intensity of what the playoffs are going to show after. But who knows? We'll see. We'll probably be able to test it out in 2022 at some point and see what we like the most. But looking at the votes, it seems as though the majority of chat thinks that Liquid is going to come out in seed number 1. I have Sentinels still coming out as seed number 1. I even said in an upcomer, like Sentinels are probably going to storm through this tournament again without dropping a series and winning champions. That's how copium I'm in right now for Sentinels. Even though I love Envy and Cloud9, and I think they could make it, and I love Liquid as well, I still think Sentinels are coming out in full strength. So, Tanny, what do you think? Who are your top 2 teams as number 1 seed and number 2 seed?
I mean, I think it's the same as you. I think Sentinels a little bit above Liquid in my eyes right now. And yeah, Liquid are definitely just making out this group.
Oh yeah. Chris, same thing, or you have Liquid first?
No, I actually have to give the edge to Liquid, and that's not. I don't know. It's not even necessarily because I think Liquid will do better at this event. I just think the fact that I have seen Liquid very recently and they are in form means that it's very hard for me to choose Sentinels who, yes, like they're always going to be good. They are always going to get out of this group regardless.
Yeah.
But to choose who's going to win that winners BO3, I would much rather go with the team that I've seen that is in good form recently versus a team that the last time I saw them quite a while ago, they were not at their best, right?
All right,
that doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, it's just you kind of have to because of the information, the circumstances. I still like Sentinels a lot in this matchup. I could see, like, it feels like a coin flip, bro. It really does.
Keep digging, keep protecting yourself just in case Sentinels makes it through, Dream. But
all right, but hear me out.
Yeah.
Okay, because the first match versus Liquid and Kru is being played from the practice rooms, right?
Yeah.
Imagine Kru treat it like a scrim and beat Liquid.
Oh no!
Because it's not on stage.
No, I was gonna bring that up actually. Is the Liquid being in the practice facility going to take their like experience advantage away from them?
Yeah.
Because if their opponents, you know, get to be in the practice facility as well, which they will be, then yeah, that's actually something I didn't think about. All right, well,
no walkouts, no hype.
Liquid's gonna get double eliminated by Kru. You heard it here first.
We'll see. I mean, we could have that alternate universe. It could potentially happen. I think Kru, as we mentioned before, I think you agree, Dream, that they have that dark horse potential. And I said it on this show that they potentially don't, but I did say on another show that they potentially do. So I just have a mixed bag of feelings as to what type of Kru is going to show up out of this group. But that's going to be it. So that's going to be Dream and the chat agreeing that it's going to be Liquid coming out at seed number 1 and Sentinels seed number 2. Tenny and I with Sentinels first and Liquid second. But it's time for our break. So Dream, this is where we unfortunately must depart. So I want to know what's coming up next for you, actually, Chris, from now until the end of the year for 2021.
We're just playing in the NSG weeklies.
Nice.
Been enjoying doing that. Grinding out the off season a little bit. We're still in talks about potentially going to something else that I'm not going to say because if we can't go, then it'll be a bummer. But you might see some interesting stuff. Keep your eyes out.
Hell yeah.
And then probably just myself and some of the players on the team or Moon, the other coach, are planning on I don't know, watching some of these matches for the event, making some content, talking some shit. So that's my plan for the next month.
Yeah, which officially that came out here for the watch party in NA for tomorrow. We have Shroud, Tarek, Kaide, Ludwig, and the Plat Chat podcast. So those guys are going to be the official streams that you guys could check out. But with that, Chris, thank you so much, man, for tagging in for Trippy and for hanging out for Group A and B. Wish you the best for now into the end of the year with the NSG monthlies and weeklies. And, you know, I want to take the occasion as well. I know it's early, but I want to wish you happy holidays just in case, who knows, from now until then, I don't get to talk to you. But we wish you all the best, at least for Cloud9 White. From now until the end of the year. So with that, chat, let's take a break. And when we come back, we're going to have Dax and also Mike's HD to break down Group C and D with Tanny and myself coming back from break here for Valoranting. Friends of Valoranting, welcome back to Valoranting. This time we have our friend Dax that's going to be joining us. And I'm so happy to have you back here, brother, because the last time that we had you on, I was like, fuck, man, this guy's fucking cool. We need more of Dax in our lives. And I think also that you were announced, right, to be casting some champions from your region as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Yeah,
nice.
like I did the Asia LCQ, gonna be doing the Filipino broadcast here with some of the boys from the English side and some, of course, from the Philippines side. But I'm happy to be here with all of my pixelized glory. Thank you. No SCA Internet
Hell
on
yeah.
production. Always a good thing. So no matter what I do, gonna be like this. So at least my skin's gonna look a little flawless for once.
You know what? I was just telling you before we went live too that I have the same thing, the same issue as you, and I'm just connecting from Canada East Coast to like California or Phoenix West Coast. So sometimes it just happens that way. You know, it's whoever's on the right side boxes usually has that issue apparently. So I'm glad that it's you, not me, because I'm the host for today. So That's how it's gonna go. But it's looking to get better. It's looking to get better. But let's get into it, man. We have you on. We're gonna talk about Group C, and I think Group C in there is gonna have like some immense copium for at least Team Secret, which is great. But we'll get into that First off, before we talk about the groups or the teams more specifically, what are your thoughts overall at this Group C? Because I think for me, looking at it, it's gonna be pretty easy peasy to predict Gambit as that #1 seed, but is it going to be a toss-up for the other 3 teams?
I mean, that's the thing. It's honestly a group of life. Like I'm no bias or whatever. No kind of like okay, we're gonna do Team Secret all the way. We're gonna say that for later. That is gonna be a whole essay and a half because I really feel like for this group, in essence, it's either there's no real momentum outright, or even in the case of Gambit, there's a bit of that negative momentum. We watch Red Bull and they're like they get 13-0, sure, they're trying out a lot of different things, yes, but that's still like Gambit. Aren't you guys a defending champion? So you gotta wonder that. But between the likes of Team Secret, Crazy Raccoon, as well as Team Vikings, there is actually a case to be made. And I feel like you're really just running that local scene, you're the ones who can always make a case for that team so far between all these teams that have been really trying to grind to make it here to champions in the first place.
All right, well, we'll talk about the whole PM here for Team Secret once we get there. But let's start things off, Tanny, with Gambit. I think Gambit, of course, returning champions from Berlin in Masters 3. My biggest question right now is, can Gambit repeat that performance? Because there's been an interview that came out, I forgot with who, but it was with the coach of Gambit, and he was like, I wasn't really happy about our preparation so far with how things have been going, boot camping for champions. And he said that coming into the tournament before the boot camp or before boot camp, they think that it would probably be top 8, and then now with the practice it's like top 4. So the confidence to even try to be like, oh, we'll just I guess it's their style to be like, we'll just play our own game and figure out how it goes, because they never give themselves that pressure of wanting to be #1. But it seems worrying for me if the coach, who was actually even nominated to try to be one of the finalists as like Coach of the Year with the Esports Awards, is saying that their team could have maybe gotten top 8 before the boot camp after winning Masters 3. Well, how crazy is that?
Yeah, I mean, if you've ever scrimmed Gambit, you know that they're a team who absolutely try hard in scrims, you know? It's by far the toughest scrim you'll have in EMEA. It got to the point where my players would be like, stop booking them as the first scrim of the day. We just haven't woken up yet. Like it's a really tough matchup every time. Like they always come up with new stuff in scrims. They try hard. They play it like it's like Masters finals or something, you know? It's crazy what they do. And recently, like what the Scrimbucks have been saying is that they just aren't doing that good. So I don't know if it's that they've taken their foot off the pedal a little bit when it comes to just scrims, or if it's the overall form of the team, which is taking a little bit of a hit. But yeah, it's a little bit concerning to hear. I'm not sure how much they've gone down. But in my mind, it's hard to go from a level where you don't lose a single map going into the finals to not even making it out of groups or something, you know. I think they're still going to make it out of this group, no problem at all. But are they going to do much more than that? I'm not entirely convinced, just based off what Eng's saying. And Eng is he's a good coach. He's from Overwatch as well. From old Overwatch. Like I've known him for a while, and he does just speak his mind, you know. So
feels like that's how they are usually in that region.
Yeah, exactly. You got to respect it, you know. He's not just being like, yeah, you know, things are going great, everything's going great. Like he's being realistic about how they're doing, and it is good to see that like honesty in a coach. I'm not sure how the players feel about that. Being like, oh yeah, you guys just aren't doing good right now. I would think that they know it. You know, they're very, very smart players. Like,
of course.
they are insane.
Which also shows that like a team like Gambit going into like the grand finals versus Envy pugged out fucking Haven and like
Yeah.
just chose random agents and still beat them, right? In the grand finals in map number 2, where Envy should at least had that in the bag for the North American side, and that's the crazy one. But Dax, first off, I want to say give a quick shout out to everybody that's in chat that stayed awake with you and that
Hey,
woke up
what's
just
up,
to have you come
guys?
on the show. So 3:40 a.m. for you right now. Really appreciate you taking the time and staying up for this. And you know, you have champions to cast in a few hours, so I guess you're resetting your schedule as well to make sure you're gonna be okay to be able to cast later. But for everybody else that's currently like staying awake and just woke up for this, big shout out to you guys for supporting Dax here. But Dax, have you been hearing anything in the Scrimbuck scene or in the back end to what to expect of Gambit?
I mean, Gambit right now, I think they really are. You don't even need to look into the Scrimbooks too much because they're very honest about what
Mhm.
they have to say. Their coach said that, and I know there was a recent article from VLR where Nats
Mhm.
basically said, since he got that COVID, it affected them. Their preparation, it isn't as refined as well. And we still just can look back at how Red Bull was being played in the first place. You have the likes of, if I remember correctly, Defo trying to be a bit more of that carry
Mhm.
jet that it isn't really the Gambit playstyle. We know for Gambit, it's all about that defense. It's all about Nance being the ultimate hard carry. He's the real MVP that everyone knows and loves. And
Mhm.
come on, Split, you get that Sova Chronicle. I was amazed. Yeah, that 30 kill. He plays Sova and Split, and he would make me a believer. But still, it really goes to show for Gambit right now. I think they basically put themselves in a situation where they're back in a kind of low-key manner where they really excel. They're like, okay, Gambit is a great team.
Mhm.
Yes, everyone knows that they're defending champion, but putting themselves in a position where it's not them having the ultimate spotlight right now
Mhm.
will really allow them to just get the success they're looking for.
Mhm.
Because this squad, how many times have we seen it in terms of how they just talk in the first place? They just come in, not only they can play for experience to win the championship, but
Yeah.
also it really feels like game by game they take it so very seriously. Because that's also one thing Nance was able to say, that he was talking about how the first match against Team Secret, it's already something like a final. So that mentality is all about being as honest, as serious as possible, but you don't need to have all that hush hush, whisper, whatever's going on in behind the scenes. For Gambit, it's just right there out in the open, and this is why many expect them to, at the very least, make out of the groups, because they're just a team that will perform no matter what anyway.
Mm-hmm. Even looking at what Chronicle playing Sova and Split, it's for me it wasn't anything new, to be honest. It's just like how it's gonna look with Gambit overall. Because for me, when I think about a Sova and Split, I'm thinking about Shao of FPX before too, and this is also like a
Oh no, not FPX.
yeah, okay. Well, we're not really going to talk about Shao FPS in the long term, but I'm just saying, like at least somebody that brought out a Sova onto Split. He was the first one, right? At least from my gatherings too, from watching all these VODs. But Gambit, in my opinion, how much are we going to take away from Red Bull Homeground though, with how they played and what they were trying out? Because I think this is something quite cool to see Chronicle play Split. Will they necessarily use him on Split? Potentially not, but even then, if they do, I still feel that the composition would be different around Chronicle as a Silva, right? Because if I'm not mistaken, I don't think we saw a Viper in that comp on Split. So if you're trying to go for the typical Astra and Viper on a map like Split to be your anchored players, and then not have Nats play a Cypher instead on that map, he could potentially play that Viper, but the combination of the Viper and Sova, Molly, and Shock Darts could do a lot of damage if you want to do a lot of these preset hits in the beginning. So you take it with a grain of salt of what it could potentially bring into a map like Split, into what Gambit can bring onto a map like Split. But again, I don't rely, like I didn't pay too much attention to the homegrown to like do full analysis of every single map, because I just took that with, okay, it's just teams are practicing what they could bring to champions here, Tanny.
Yeah, honestly, I wouldn't take too much from home grounds. Like, even if they are playing Sova on Split, I can see that being a thing. I don't think they were playing it seriously in home grounds. Like, I think it's a little bit underrated to actually play Sova on Split, just because no one else can prepare for it, because no one else plays it in scrims, you know?
Yeah.
So when you go into the official, like, they have no idea what lineups there are, where the shock darts land, what recons recon spots they need to look out for, things like that, you know? So you just get like that little bit extra value that you don't get on the other maps where it's played a lot more. Like if you arrow on Haven, for example, everyone's just going to instantly shoot it, you know, before it even like ticks.
Yeah.
On Split, no one knows where it's going to land, so they can't be prepared for it. So I can definitely see them playing it out. This team has been the most consistent team the whole year in EMEA, you know?
Yeah.
Like Masters 1, they won. Masters, I mean, they were one map away from getting to Masters 2. I think they got a little bit unlucky, you know, in that versus Liquid. And Masters 3, they won, and now they're here. Like, they've been consistently so good. So
Yeah.
even if they've dropped off a bit, I don't see it being enough to rule them out of, you know, like top 4 or anything like that.
Yeah, I even think that, you know, we take home grounds from Red Bull with a grain of salt, right? But at the same time, as you mentioned, Tanny, they're the type of team that's going to take every scrim like a Masters. So I think they still played it seriously on that note to figure out how it may work with potential agents they could use on different maps, right? So it looks kind of wonky with the composition that they walk into, but I still think that they still wanted to play it to kind of win it, to really bring that practice in and see how it's going to go. But I think overall, looking at the results in the past few months of how Gambit has been doing is also off the back of course, Nats, which I was going to call him Stan because I always thought that Nats backwards was going to be Stan, but I think we're going to keep him as Nats. And Dax, just talking about Nats overall, like how much pressure do you think is on his shoulders right now in that sense? Because he's amazing. Right? He could lurk super well. He's showed us the tech of what he could do with Viper, his lurk of what he could do with Cypher, playing around smokes and cages and just dominating people on home grounds. But overall, do you think he's finally going to be figured out going into Champions?
I really feel like even if you figure it out, he still find a way to clutch it in the first place. Who kept Cypher cool for so very long, and maybe that's one of the reasons why in the Red Bull side they were trying out something different. Like I mentioned, the Defo Jet being something to be a bit more to watch out for, because maybe that's something they're looking at. Because Naps has this huge target on him already. He is some people consider probably the best player right now in
the
whole world by this point, and just how he defines the Sentinel, how he's just able to whip out all of these different angles. And no matter what, you're gonna be under pressure, especially when you see Gambit just playing that full lockdown with Nats at the helm.
No, for sure. I definitely feel that too, and I even think that you know, the swoop peak from Viper is even better now. Looking at, you know, what Sideshow tweeted out before from another account called, I think, Viper Sweep or something like that. It was just like one person that nerds out on Viper nonstop outside of Lothar. Like, can you believe that? Somebody else outside of Lothar nerds out on Viper, and he came out with a video on YouTube that showed how the swoop peak is actually a little bit better, because even before the nerf, the swoop peak, you had to be within the radius of the orb that was on the ground, so you were just in that little circle around that. But now, with the latest patch, depending if Champions is played on 3.29, is that you could be on the northern hemisphere or circumference of the whole circle of where you want to peak. So let's say you put your orb in the middle, you could be anywhere around in the front of that circular area, and you'll still get a 300 to 350 millisecond peeker's advantage. So that makes it even harder, because now Nats could actually go for a swoop peek and be anywhere in that area, where if your crosshair placement is not in the middle, you're gonna play like it's a European soccer or European football. You have to guess left or right of when that smoke comes down to see if Nats is gonna be there. So that's gonna make it even more dangerous, in my opinion, looking at Nats overall. You're gonna say something, Dex?
Maybe these guys are subscribed to what Gambit is doing. Maybe it's an out by Gambit between this channel and Sova split lineups by not Chronicle. Boom! There you go. You guys need to just find the right channel on YouTube, and you got the new Gambit playstyle already on lock. So who knows? Because I wouldn't really be too surprised, honestly, to see
I think that's
these kind
called
of plays come on
average
out,
Jonas.
coming into someone call him already. But coming into Group C, because this is the group where they can really quote unquote experiment. It's not like really disrespecting the teams they are with right now, but it's just because they're the clear favorite from having that championship, from having the performance in such a tough region, that there is a chance for them to try things out. And especially once you get into the playoffs, that single elimination here in the group stage, maybe you mess up against Team Secret. And okay, go ahead. Let's go for lower gauntlet. I'm not saying, but I'm just saying there is more room to try things out for Gambit,
Yeah.
especially. I really feel like just having that grand champion title is a target, and it kind of honestly affected Sentinels in a way also, besides them just playing the same shit anyway.
Yeah. Well, at least before we get into Team Secret, let's stay in that region. Let's go and talk about Crazy Raccoon. So Crazy Raccoon has what, 7-player roster, 8-player roster that we don't have them all showed up here. But they've also been a team that, you know, I hold them to heart very dearly because of just how Neth reacts on wins and losses, and how heartbreaking it was to watch them lose in Iceland so early and not getting a single map. This time they actually get a map, which is great. They got a series on top of that too. Zeta Division was the other Japanese team that got at least one map. But it's nice to see that there's an improvement of Crazy Raccoon. But have they improved enough here going into Champions? And to stay in the region, let's continue to ask that question to you, Dax, because it's probably you're keeping your ears close to the ground as to what's happening in that region. And what have you heard about Crazy Raccoon?
The biggest thing about Japan in general is, in all honesty, in terms of the totem pole of scrims, Japan is actually at the very lowest.
Ooh.
So the hierarchy here, especially after LCQ right now, it's Vision Strikers number 1
Yep.
because they're just that good.
Yep.
And then it's SEA, and then Korea, and then Japan. Before LCQ around Masters 3, it was Korea, SEA, and Japan. So there's basically a lot of confidence right now for any Asian team to face off against these Japanese teams. But they've really shown here in the world stage that they can perform, that they can really bring out that grit. And something I've noticed, honestly, is between the basically the season between Masters 3 as well as this Champions, I've watched some of the Japanese players on the roster actually play in a tournament called the UTAGE. I couldn't really understand anything. It's in Japanese. I'm sorry. I can't translate all of that for you. But the likes of Net, I believe the likes of Fisker, and I do believe it was Ade. They're also playing in a few different teams, just playing roles like the duelist. And that's something we were seeing at the very end of Master 3. Like Fisker, especially, become more and more of those duelists. You're getting a little bit more, I'd say, reprieve for the likes of Munchkin, who kind of just was looked at as the hard carry for quite a while. And it really goes to show for Crazy Raccoon, this is a Japanese squadron that isn't just relying on their Korean imports. This is a team that is really trying to up their ante, up their whole stock. And this is why we also saw a lot of those rotations in Masters number 3 to see who would actually perform in the proper field at the proper time.
Yeah, even then it's starting to get tougher for the Japanese scene too, because most recently, we'll talk about that next week, but you know, we had a roster change for Northeption. The two Korean players in there, and Seldom is out, and Astel is also out of that roster too, so potentially going back to like this influx rumor that is going back into South Korea. But focusing back here on Crazy Raccoon, is the potential there right now here, Tanny? What did you see from Crazy Raccoon with this series that they got against Avant Liberty? And you know, you told me that they were pretty low. You were pretty low on HL anyways, but does that take away of how Crazy Raccoon kind of looked in Berlin? And does it also take away of what to expect of Crazy Raccoon at Champions?
I mean, I don't think it takes away of how well they did, because in the lower bracket they actually did, you know, relatively well for themselves. But it's not a team where I'm looking at it and being like, oh, you know, this is clearly where they're lacking something. It's not like, oh, they're lacking firepower here, or they're lacking these strats here, or these callouts, or whatever it may be. It's just, I think they're like slightly worse than the other teams on everything, you know? Which makes them like still a very good team competing with like the top teams.
Yes.
But not enough to actually win against them and like move on to the next stage. And I think we're going to see something similar here. I honestly, with this group, I'm not convinced who the second place team would be.
Yeah.
But it could be them, honestly. Like if they just improve like, you know, 5%, I could see them winning over like Secret and Vikings.
Well,
It's
Yeah,
It's just a bit of an odd group, to be honest.
it
There's a
is.
chance. It's. I'm just seeing for Crazy Raccoon. You know what their path to victory is? Is stay away from Asia. Stay away from the Asian teams that basically have their number in a lot of aspects. Because for months, from what I hear, really in SCA, it's just like, oh, Japan, we got this, no problem. And if you look at LCQ, besides Norteption performing, because you have like Soldam who can really fight
Yeah.
against the SEA playstyle. It was Fennel. It was, I believe, Reject also. They're copping out so very early. So overall, Japan does have the struggle. But you guys mentioned Crazy Raccoon in general. If you want to look at different kind of scrim bucks here in the champion scene, here in Berlin, that's where they get their points. And especially you have a team like Team Vikings here in this field right now, that can be a matchup that they can take on. And what if we get the third times the charm rematch
Yeah.
between Crazy Raccoon and Gambit? Will it be the charm that they're looking for the victory? Will that be the ultimate copium that everyone wants to happen?
That would be sick. That would actually be
Honestly,
sick.
these guys are the opposite of Kru, where they don't do well in scrims. Like, you can ask most EU teams who scrim them, they will get slaughtered in scrims. But when it comes to officials, they actually put up close games versus
Yeah.
very, very good teams, you know?
Yeah.
And that's what's surprising about them. Like, I just don't know, like, how you can improve this team
It's just
without like making some really weird moves. from
that's
the
why they
outside.
call it Crazy Raccoon, man. It's just like one day you're just taking out the trash, you don't expect it. You open the lid and holy fuck, there's a family of raccoons there just eating all your shit. And they're gonna do the same thing at Champions in this group, and potentially against a team like right here, Team Secret. We're talking about him right now. It's time to talk about Team Secret, where we don't know who that second team is gonna be moving forward in outside of this Group C, and now that we talked about the scrim bucks into the regions, right? Dax, you were talking to me about it was Vision Strikers, then Southeast Asia, then Korea, then Japan. Tell me about Bren Esports before going into Team Secret, because the last time we had you in here, we were talking about Bren Esports, and myself, I was on that hopium to see Bren Esports do very well at Masters. So talk to me about the change from Bren Esports to Team Secret. What did Team Secret bring to Bren Esports that Bren Esports didn't have? Are they boot camping outside of the country now? What's been going on here for Team Secret?
I think we can actually go back first to that episode we were together.
Yep.
I came in bright-eyed, so happy. Bren Esports Philippine shooter scene making it to the world stage, and it was gonna be amazing. And then everything happened, and then they kind of shot the bed in all the tournaments. So like, but there are a lot of reasons why is that happening. But first things first, I think it's best to clear up why the move from Bren to Team Secret.
Yeah.
Overall, it's just really first the contract just expired. So a year contract, that's pretty
I
much
see.
it. They didn't expect that it was gonna be all the way. They were gonna make it the champions anyway. That would have been their last tournament. It wasn't anything on Bren's fault. It basically, oh, everything gets screwed on over. It's just a lot of different things happening in such unfortunate ways, and just how difficult the COVID situation really here is in the Philippines. But I think the biggest change that happened between going to Bren to going to Team Secret is actually that lack of boot camp here locally.
Okay.
And that's the history of that former Bren Esports roster. They were dominant in the local scene as the black and yellow, but they screwed up once in Valorant Challengers, losing to a team called Hashra, because that was the only fucking week that they decided to stay home. And there you go. And they took the L. They were like, guys, we are going to be going for that bootcamp. We are going to be staying together. And ever since they got into Team Secret, yeah, there's just not that local facility that they can use. Why did they change though? Why did they go to Team Secret? Because there's really just that prestige right now. For many of these Philippine teams, and just having that illustrious basically EU org coming in supporting SCA, it's such a different banner. It's not a knock on Brand, which is really one of the best orgs here in the Philippines itself, but at the same time, this is a squad that is trying to really make that history, because this is the first time we're ever gonna see a Philippine team in an FPS scene stage. Like, sure, Dota, that's a game that the Filipinos have done before, and Jesse Bash, he was here like a few years ago in Berlin, in Germany specifically, or was it Frankfurt? I don't know my geography, but that's gonna be it. But back to my points, what is the biggest problem right now for Team Secret? It's really just that lack of comfort in the tournaments that they played. the biggest one was the KGC one. It had something called agent bans. So
Yeah,
it
I
basically
remember
screwed
that.
over someone like Jesse Bash.
Yeah, yeah.
And so in those sense, like, oh, what do we do now? And the other thing is the local tournaments that they have lost. There is this one team that we have been all looking forward to take care of this former brand roster. And it's called South Built Esports. The South Built Esports roster is actually the ex-Bren Esports CSGO roster. So basically, it's the Bren cinematic universe in the Filipino scene. You have Team Secret, which is ex-Bren Valorant. You have South Built Esports, which is now the #1 team, which was ex-Bren CSGO. And you have a new Bren Esports roster filled with some of the players that they got basically from some of their academy teams and the like.
Damn.
What happened here? Why was South Built Esports not on the radar of anyone? Why were they not in VCT? Because in all honesty, they choked hard on VCT. This is 100% true because they had a similar record as Bren Esports back then, or Team Secret now. They would win every single fucking community tournament they would join. And as soon as they get into VCT, what happens? First, they don't meet that Bren, now Team Secret roster. Second, they get outed on the quarterfinals. And if this was just them making it to something like Sea Challengers 3, this would be a team we would be talking about, not just, the full sense, incredible. They've had their heyday, they've really impressed, but I really feel like that would be a team to watch out for LCQ. So it really, the writing is on the wall. Why Team Secret has this negative momentum right now.
Yeah.
But
So
behind the scenes, man, there's just so much conflicting reports that I just can't wait to get out. But I do want to hear a little bit more from you guys because I'm talking so much already.
all good, all good. I'm just thinking that Bren Esports, after everything that you've explained, is like the immortals of North America then, because they just are filtering so many good talent coming out of that roster and showing an impact, the Filipino scene into Southeast Asia. So props to Bren Esports for that. But, this is the thing for me, because we talk about Team Secret, and we talked about the panel that we had on Reddit, where teams were ranking 1 to 16, who would be the #1, of course, and who would be number 16. And I'm looking at it currently, and we're maybe about 15 people, let's say 12 people at least. And out of 12 people, I'd say at least 3/4 of the people are putting Team Secret at the bottom at number 16. And I believe that it's potentially because nobody has seen Bren Esports or Team Secret since the VCTs of Challengers 3 Season 3, right? Before Masters 3. So give us a little bit of a lowdown about Team Secret as to why this should be a force to be reckoned with in this group, at least. Why can they be Gambit? Do they have what it takes to be Gambit, or should they be able to make it out of their group quite easily here?
Look, okay, I was talking to the coach right before this podcast. We were chatting about a few things like the press conference and all light. And there was one thing he said to me: if we beat Gambit, we're winning this whole tournament. That's
I mean, that's
gonna be a
enough.
big
Yep.
one right there.
Yep.
But this is really where it comes to. For the side of Team Secret, now that they're all together, this is where they can perform. And in all honesty, initial reports of Team Secret where they were basically having a struggle. And Gabo said himself, when I first talked to him, he said specifically, it's different watching them than compared to playing with them. And when I heard that, I was a little afraid because I felt like, okay, these guys are getting shell shocked. And if only they were able to go to Masters 3 Berlin, maybe they could have acclimated a lot faster and they would perform better. But recently, we have been talking. He said everything is feeling a lot better. All the players are feeling a lot more competent. Everyone is feeling absolutely confident in how they play. And given that, in terms of the group, there's just so much potential for them to get this victory. Let's pretend. Okay, sure, Gambit, they don't win against that. They have to deal with either Crazy Raccoon or Team Vikings to make it to the second slot.
Yeah.
So looking at Crazy Raccoon, there is just that immediate, okay, we have scrimmed this region, we have scrimmed it before. And if I remember correctly, watching just how Crazy Raccoon just plays, they really have to figure out what to do against a team like Team Secret, and it just becomes that whole SEA versus Japan dynamic that really has not been solved and has been proven specifically on VCT by LCQ. And in the meantime, once we get into Team Vikings, it's also going to be just how the philosophy of Team Secret and Team Vikings are. Because I know we haven't talked about Team Vikings yet, but this is one point I have to make. For Team Secret, then Bren Esports, it used to be 4+1. They needed to find someone, and they eventually found Wits to be that fifth. But
Yeah.
Vikings, on the flip side, they have not made a change at all, except their coach.
Yep.
And I really feel like it's just not gonna work out for them. The lack of duelists, and there you have it. Since we're already talking
Let's
about
do
them,
it.
we have the Team Vikings roster. So man, take it away.
I mean, that's the scary part for me too, because we're looking at, so we talk about Team Secret potentially being like low into scrim bucks into the rankings, and for me personally, apologies to the Brazilian fans, but they're that team for me that's been the most disappointing going into Reykjavik, right? And I want to know your thoughts here, Tanny, because you told me that you have more faith in Vikings than you do with anybody else currently, or I guess not anybody else, but more than Furia, right? But we haven't seen any of Vikings like since, at least for me, since that Masters Reykjavik. So are they pulling out the Astra? Are they still playing an Omen? What's going on with their playstyle? Like, what's changed? Like, what have you seen in that in the Vikings roster potential going into Champions that you're telling me that you might have better faith into Vikings than you would than Sharks?
Honestly, the biggest issue with them going into Masters 2 was they had no strats. Like, and that was self-admitted. I've talked to like people on their team, and they acknowledged that it was a problem. So the biggest thing is that they now have a coach. That is what's pushing them over Furia for me. And yeah, we haven't seen them since Masters 2, but in scrims they were actually doing pretty damn well, even leading up to Masters 2, and I hope they've got that like land nerves out the way now.
Yeah.
That plus coach plus new strats plus hopefully
it sounds like nothing but hope you'll hear.
Yeah, hopefully a bit of a boot camp buff, because I know they've been in EU for a little while.
Yeah.
Should make this a very interesting group. I don't think they're going to get run over by anyone here. And I think they're actually a pretty good contender for second place. Yeah, going back to the secret thing a sec, like in the matchup between them, these are both teams we haven't seen in ages, so that's
Right.
what I'm kind of excited to actually see them play now.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting to see how they actually take on, the new meta, the new agents and stuff like that. Because yeah, we just haven't seen them. So I don't have that much to say on
I
either
get
of
it.
these teams.
Yeah,
Honestly,
makes
like
sense.
with how random the seedings were, because it was Rivington and Ender that were pulling balls out of a hat for seeding all these teams. Like the storylines for all of these, it's so cool because it builds up very well. Because again, you're going into Team Secret and Vikings that we haven't seen since Masters 2, right? Or just in general for Brent Esports back then. And then you look at, for example, Group D, which we'll talk about later, which is like a Cloud9 that's been on an up and up versus a Fnatic that looks to come back from their form of Iceland to see if they could be that SMFC, to see if they could be that early Fnatic form again. Then you also have in Group B, like the final matchup potential between Sentinels and Liquid is just really cool how everything builds up so far. And then also because we have Gambit, the winners of Masters, it's like, well, they're the winners of Masters. We'll cut them some slack and see how it's going to go into the playoffs. So they won't get tested, quote unquote, until they actually make it out of their group into the quarterfinals. So that's really cool how it all like fell into place. But just back here on Vikings overall, yes, they brought a coach in, but is that going to be enough going into this matchup? Yes, maybe they look good into the scrims, but man, it was a wake up call when they played in Iceland. And also for Masters 3, you also had a Brazilian team that went into Europe, into the CIS region to boot camp, and that was Sharks themselves. And how did Sharks do in Masters 3? Not too well here, Dex.
Yeah, and I think about the Brazilian scene in general, that they have many similarities with the SEA side. That you just try to go for the hard mechanics, and then you realize, okay, this isn't enough. That's when you go for the tactics, and that's when you look for more. And when you look at Vikings, come on, it's pretty much the Stacey show plus, of course, the rest of the roster. Stacey is just an incredible player.
Yeah.
And when I look at Vikings as a roster, it's still that lack of duelists in a way. There's just not that much impact per se. Yes, we do have some players there who play the duelist role, who fill in the Jet and the Rays and all. Like sometimes Stacey does it rather than the Sova, and I think that's one issue that Vikings really needs to remedy if they really decided to stick it out. And That's my biggest concern. They stuck it out with this roster. Does that mean that they filled up their holes in the first place? And I agree with Danny. I've heard indeed that Team Vikings did step up their scrims. So in terms of the Brazilian rights, there was Vivo Keyd doing the best, and then Vikings, and then the Furia roster there. So there is a lot of hope for all these teams. And this is me having all the team secret in my heart. It really feels like each team has a proper chance of beating each other. It's not that, oh, this matchup is gonna happen because of that. Oh, this matchup because Team Secret has been shitting the bed for all the tournaments and losing to non-champions teams that they're not gonna make it. And Crazy Raccoon, not gonna figure out what's gonna happen early. Once we honestly get into the lower bracket that we all expect, where Gambit just is that kind of guy who somehow gets seated at the Thanksgiving kids table. They're just gonna be watching from their perch and then seeing who's gonna be fighting who first. But I really feel like for the side of Crazy Raccoon, the best scenario is for them if they can avoid Team Secret, and we do get that Gambit versus Crazy Raccoon kind of setup. And on for the side of Team Secret, it's just you get Crazy Raccoon first, get that confidence, go for Vikings, or of course you win Gambit Esports. But if that happens, the Pinoy pride will burst through, and Berlin will be seated in not just the black and white, the blue, red, the yellow, the white, all the Philippine colors right there.
And that's why it comes down to predictions here, because you just saw all the previews that was actually laid out in the scenarios by Dax at the same time. And I know, Dax, for you, let's face it, we have Secret coming out here, but my question to you is, Secret number 1 seed or number 2 seed?
I'm sorry, Gabo, but come on, Gambit Esports, you gotta respect them. You gotta give it to them for just being that champion. And this is a team that should make it to the playoffs with no real issue. But Secret is my 2nd seed, my guys. And if you believe like I do, you're gonna press that number 2.
Dude, I mean, you already have supporters right now for Secret and for Gambit. I think it makes absolute sense that you have Gambit as that number 1. But I actually have Crazy Raccoon making it out of Group 2. Just because of, again, we don't have enough footage from Secret and for Vikings since Masters 2. But Crazy Raccoon, we've seen him all these events so far. And I love the improvement that I've seen from Crazy Raccoon after every tournament. So coming down to this, it really comes down to what Secret is going to pull out. What's going to come out of the box of secrets. What is going to be the answer that Secret has, and will it actually dominate Crazy Raccoon here? And what are your thoughts on that one, Tanny?
I'm gonna go with Secret, actually, just because I haven't seen them in a little while.
Yes!
But I think the SEA region is actually a little bit underrated in how good
it is.
Like,
it is.
Well, we were a bit surprised when we came up against Paper X and it wasn't just a blowover.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm gonna go with Secret as a 2nd. Obviously, Gambit as a 1st.
Awesome.
I thought I converted them fully to go Secret first and then Gambit 2nd.
Well, I mean, you had my copium, you had my stonks for Bren Esports when we actually went into the previews for Masters 3. Unfortunately, that didn't happen, but I still always believe here in the Crazy Raccoon, and we'll see how that comes out. So that's going to end it for Group C, and it's also going to be time for you to go to bed here, Dax. So big thank you for coming on with us and hanging out here, and just on time. I'm making you go to bed at 4:20 in the morning. So what's going on for you soon? I mean, I know you're going to be casting the champions on the Filipino channel. So what's going on outside of that? Anything else until the end of the year?
No, I'm just doing some Filipino broadcasts for other games as well for World Tournaments. So it's actually really hype because I'm happy to do these local broadcasts. Maybe next year we get to meet each other though for Valorant Champions if all things come to pass. And I think that's just pretty much it. Book until we get into Christmas, just celebrate and just work on VCT next year and to support all the boys in the SEA region. I just love how much more believers we're really getting. Even though I actually have a few opinions about how LCQ is seen as by many people, I just like it that SEA is getting noticed. And this is a region that we personally have seen come from the bottom to the top. If you were talking to me at the very start of this year, it's like SEA, nah, no chance really. They're just gonna get shot out by Korea, they're gonna get shot out by Japan. But seeing really how they've improved, I think compared to our other Asian counterparts, the difference between Masters 1, the Masters 2, the Masters 3 is just so vast. And here in Champions, they're gonna look to prove it between Team Secret, X10, and Full Sense.
Nice. Well, with that,
Is this
Dex.
is this the first FPS that SEA has been like, on the global stage for?
Ooh.
On the PH side, that's for sure. I'm not too sure
Yeah.
about the Thailand side, but it's
It's
already
like
history
Dota,
for
they
us
do
being here.
super
Yeah,
well.
Dota
we're
to do
just-
super. I was going to say
we-
Dota to do super well. I think Rainbow Six. I haven't seen anything. Counter Strike. I haven't seen anything. So
Yeah.
I think this definitely
good to
is
see
going to be
that.
the first one. Yeah.
It's amazing. It's history, and the Vash. He's like, come on, I'm here again in Germany for a world tournament. He's the father of Philippine esports, guys. So,
Awesome.
Much respect.
Well, Dax, thank you so much for coming on, man. Get some rest, get some good rest because you have a long 10 days up ahead for you. So good luck and have fun casting champions as well. I'll try to tune in, even though I won't understand a single word. But I definitely am there to support you. I want to see more of you as well in 2022. So all the best, brother.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Well, with that, it's time to bring on our final group chat. It's time to bring on Mike's high definition. Mike's. Welcome, brother. Look at him buying the Gymshark stuff, getting ready for a workout, getting ready to lift up the predictions going into this one so far into Group D. Welcome to the show, man. I know it's been busy for us in the past few weeks just doing all these predictions from different podcasts and shows, but welcome to Valoranting again.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I had to get the gym apparel out. I've been inspired by you and Mitch's workout stream, so I got to get in there.
Nice, man. Nice. So, yeah,
Put those
it's
yoga
been...
pants on.
Exactly. It's been a busy year for you so far here, Mike's, and going into in the end of Masters 3 now. It's still busy with VODs that you have to do so far because I'm pretty sure behind the scenes you're probably talking to quite a few people to try to get a position into coaching for now into the end of the year. We wanted to have you on last time, but I think that the scheduling didn't work out when we had all the coaches to come and talk to us. So thank you for hopping on and talking about Group D. So speaking about D's group, let's go ahead and preview that right now. So we have this, for me, is the group of death, right? So Vision Strikers, Full Sense, Fnatic, Cloud9. For your first thoughts actually going into this one too, Mike's, but before we actually get into that, actually, we have some special presence, some cameos to come in to talk about Vision Strikers and the hopium and copium and domination of Vision Strikers. So we actually do have Paper Thin that recorded a little interview and video from us from Berlin. So let's check that out and see what he has to say here about Vision Strikers.
Yo, what up, Valoranting peeps? It's Paper Thin here, coming to you live-ish, from Germany, getting ready to cast the Valorant champions. How fucking cool is that to say? And I just wanted to give some love to my boys, the Vision Strikers. I really think these guys are going to get it done here. They've been prepping their asses off. They're such a strong team. You know, Stax is one of the best IGLs in the world, on top of being one of the most clutch players in the world. I think if you're looking at, maybe Fracture being a really important map for this, I think the Vision Strikers really are going to have a good read on the map. Historically, they've had really good takes early on the maps, especially in the Asia region, and I think their agent pool specifically lines up really nicely for it. Of course, Stax being maybe the best breach in the world, really seems to fit in nicely for that. So, frankly, I think the Vision Strikers have a really damn good shot. I don't think they're going to drop a game in their group. I think they're going to 2-0, Full Sense, and then whoever comes out of that C9 Fnatic fucking shit fiesta that is going to follow. And, Vans, I love you, brother, but I don't think NA is getting it done this time. And, Mitch or whoever's supporting EU for you guys over there, you're just going to get clapped this time. I'm sorry. It's KR all the way. And the Vision Strikers, man, they've just been grinding. They're ready. And, I'm sure Achilles has a really, really, measured, intelligent, well-thought-out take on this as well. So I can't wait to hear what he has to say.
All right. Well, first off, I kind of want to know what application Paper Thin was using to make his skin look so flawless on that video, because it looks like he just got a brand new trim. The bald head is so shiny. It's so smooth. It feels like I just want to I don't know, like it's like a slip and slide that I just want to like slide onto. But
Yeah.
he was talking about here the smart takes here of Achilles, right? We know Achilles set to be one of the prominent casters here in South Korea for not only Valorant but also in Overwatch League. Has some nice takes, does a lot of research about these teams to come out with these nice stats. So let's go ahead and see what Achilles has to say.
All right. Listen up, you limp dick fuck-ups. I can't believe that I have to sit here at 12:30 a.m. and record this video to explain to you something that you should already know in your heart, is that Vision Strikers is going to win this whole fucking tournament. The fact that I have to do that just goes to show how tiny, how pea-brained you all are, that you can't wrap your heads around this very simple concept. Paper Thin's probably coming at you. He's giving you all these statistics. He's talking about how Stacks is an amazing in-game leader, how they've had this time to probably work out how they're going to utilize Lakia, and that he's going to be impactful in the team and pop off and destroy everybody in their group and beyond into that grand final to take the trophy home. All that doesn't fucking matter, though. You know how I know? I know based on pure fucking instinct. Just take a look at this team. They're stacked, they're jacked, they're ready to fuck. They're going to absolutely destroy everybody else in this tournament. One glance at them, boom, already know it. If you haven't seen them, go watch the VODs. Go to vlr.gg. Read some statistics. Do whatever you need to do, you fucking nerd. Just study up. Because if you're not behind the Vision Strikers, if you're not backing this horse, then my God, you are in the wrong game. You're going to lose all your money, all credibility that you possibly could have built up as an armchair analyst out the fucking window if you decide to back another team in this competition. They're going to pound. Don't be on the wrong side of the fence. Join me. Join my coalition. Support Vision Strikers. Because if you don't, you're just going to look like a bit of an imbecile at the end of the day, really. All right, cheers. Have a good rest of your show.
All right, well, based on that, a little bit of, not only bias, but definitely a lot of hopium coming in from Seth and from Paper Thin. So, Mike's, your thoughts. Does it make sense here that Vision Strikers are going to look really good out of the group or for the tournament in general?
I was surprised he wasn't wearing a Vision Striker shirt, too. Maybe a hat. Maybe we can get a little, like, banner in the background to say anything for it. I definitely think Vision Strikers is a strong team. It's just so hard to say, I think, for the public because we saw so little of them from Berlin.
Yeah.
But from past experience when we scrimmed them during that time, I definitely think they're a really strong team. My worry for them, like throughout this entire year, has just been, can they flip into another gear on some of these maps? Because when you look at when they play Bind, right, they still play the very Korean comp where it's Breach, Sky, Jet Ray, so there's a lot of flash and dash.
Yes.
And you get into modes where it's like, okay, so now when you're on defense, what do you do if teams are shutting down your aggression? If you're playing against a team like Gambit that can just hold this really passive default and eat up all that aggression, do you have another mode that you can flip to?
Yep.
I think that's the biggest thing for them. If they figured that second, third year out, which it definitely seemed like they had a bit of that in their earlier like group stage matches. They could definitely be like a top 4 team in the event.
I actually agree with that, and I feel that that's been the issue for like the Korean scene in general, where they can't seem to like fight against this type of like slow default playstyle that a team like Gambit's going to bring out. Is this something that you share in terms of thoughts, Tanny, for Vision Strikers or for the Korean scene in general?
Well, I don't think Gambit just bring out a slow playstyle. I think their biggest strength is switching up how fast they play.
True.
They switch up the tempo so much, and it's just so hard to read, which is why Nats is able to get these like insane lurks around the map, just because you don't know if they're like making a fast play, a slow play, like what they're doing. So, I would agree that it is something that they need to work on, but honestly, I think they just got a bit unlucky, like matched up against Gambit in the quarterfinals. If they were against any of the other teams, I think they would have actually just beaten them going into it. Even Envy, I think they would have beaten them.
Okay. So Vision Strikers still up on the hopium here and copium of the Korean scene, and also us on the analyst desk and whatnot. But that said, I wanna bring it out here as well as to how weird it was where we actually brought out Vision Strikers into Berlin, and let's revisit that again with Lakia. Leaving Newturn, expressing that he wants to rejoin into Vision Strikers, and even Vision Strikers in general. I think when we had when we had Buddha come on and talk about Vision Strikers too, it's like, well, like we already had our set pieces with Vision Strikers, and with Lakia, it's like, well, it would be stupid for us not to bring him back into our roster if he expressed, interest in coming back into the team. And I think that was like maybe 2 weeks before going into Berlin, which is potentially why you saw Lakia only playing like one map and also playing Sky on that one map of Bind, where everything else is already in place here for Vision Strikers. But after seeing the performances of Vision Strikers in Masters Berlin, do we actually foresee Lakia coming back into the roster a little bit more permanently at Champions here, Mikes?
I think it's gonna be kind of weird to slot in because it's like if they're gonna slot him in more, it's probably gonna be replacing RB right on the Sova, at least you would think.
Yeah.
Because that's obviously Lakia's the star side role he was on with New Turn. It's just so hard with this lineup, I think, because as good as Lakia is, you have Stacks, RB, Mako, Buzz, and King, which is already super stacked. And it's like, why would you at any time, even though like I think RB definitely falls off a bit on the Sova on certain maps, he's still just so good. And I think that's definitely a really hard thing to do as a coach or a manager, to sub someone out like that, even if it's preset, because they have a really good first map or something, and then your guy's coming off the bench cold. It can be really hard to do.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how much we're going to see of him. I almost kind of wish they would just let him go back into the Korean scene so we can get some more stacked Korean teams, but it may not happen anytime soon.
Again, I think to go back on that, I feel like it might, right? With Estelle and Seldom being able to go back to Korea, so that's a Jet and a Smoker, I think, if I'm not mistaken, that's what Estelle plays. That allows then the Sova to come out here from Lakia and maybe a new powerhouse outside of like the old New Turn that really brought something against Vision Strikers and made them made a run for their money, and also preventing Vision Strikers from even qualifying for Iceland at that point. That said, though, what are our thoughts overall about the rest of the roster, Tani? Because we mentioned Mako in this roster. For me, Mako is like an insane controller right now for Vision Strikers that doesn't seem to be talked about enough, because when you think about who are the best controllers so far going into anybody's top 20 list, Mako's not really talked about. It's a lot about Marv. It's a lot about Zoms in a Zoms nation, but nobody talks about Mako.
Yeah, I mean, Mako is just an insane controller. Like his Viper, I think, is almost unmatched. I think it's like close to Nat's level in how he plays the Viper, not Cypher. I agree with Mike. It's like this whole roster is just so good. At no point would you want to swap one person out of this. I've done this 6-man roster thing, and it just doesn't really work. Just because everyone wants to play all the time, and if they're being swapped out, it affects their mentality, it affects just how they think about the game and like how much time they're putting in outside and whatever else. It's super hard to make it work right now in the game where you can feasibly play all the roles.
I feel that that's where it's different though with Korea, because even then, and we bring it back to the StarCraft days, you had academy teams of like 8 players overall, the roster of like 12 players in StarCraft, and maybe like only 2 or 3 make it out into like representing like Team NBC or whatnot, going into South Korea. Then Overwatch League, they have an immense roster too. I think League of Legends, they have more than their core. So I think from the culture that you have in South Korea, which is why you also see Vision Strikers at some point, I think, had 6 or 7 people, including trials. And then you're seeing teams like Crazy Raccoon have up to like 7 people. It's just, if the opportunity is there to play, they'll take it for sure. I know that they want to play mainly, but I think they'll still put the same work ethic to make sure that they stay on top of their game, so that they can help their team. They could continue to win as a team. But it also makes sense, I guess, from a course perspective as a coach, Mike's, that you kind of want to keep like a core 5 just to make sure that the synergy stays close and tight-knit.
Yeah, and I think especially when it comes to practice time, trying to divide that up, and even just how do you decide? Because if you're just comparing Sova to Sova, right, there's so many maps that Sova's good on. It's not really like a niche role that you need to swap him in or out for 1 or 2 maps.
Yep.
How do you decide which is the better on like Acend or Haven or something like that? I feel like that's much harder then if they're in a situation like, okay, Buzz plays Jet, but on like Bind we want a Raze player or something, so we're gonna have Lakia or someone come in to play Raze.
Yeah.
I think that's a little bit of a different situation compared to you have two really good players for the same role, but you don't really know like how to weigh one in and weigh one out.
Mm-hmm. And that said, then Vision Strikers, I mean, despite all these question marks that we have around Lakia or whatnot, I still feel that they should be that team that's going to be really dominant, should be potentially easy to make it out of their groups. I think that it's still a group of death because of the other three teams, actually, right? Very similar to like looking at Group C with Gambit moving forward, and we don't know who the other three are going to move forward to. But this is another team that I wanted to touch base upon. It's Fnatic, and I want to know, actually, starting with you, Tani, like how much, again, focusing back on Fnatic as how good they were in Reykjavik, and how much we also don't really want to take too much out of the Red Bull home ground, because I mean, a lot of people who watch this at a first degree and see how Fnatic has been playing have also been saying that Fnatic is kind of like a team that was missing a little bit of coordination or whatnot, and maybe even missing that coordination towards the end of Iceland, and they haven't really found that form again. Is it true that, should we base on that, of like, if it was like off timing, if they weren't scaling well enough together as a team, that this is probably going to be those same mistakes that we're going to see coming into Champions?
I mean, Iceland worked out so well for Fnatic. They had like the perfect meta for them. It fit all of their player roles perfectly. To see that happen again, I'm not sure it's going to be in this Champions. It's been an inconsistent roster since the start. Like they didn't make Masters 1. They got knocked out in the qualifiers by like some random teams. Then they made Masters 2. Came second in it. Had an insane run.
Yep.
And then they didn't even make EMEA playoffs for like Masters 3.
Yeah.
They again got knocked out in the qualifiers for the playoffs. So it's like a really weird team to see at Champions, because like they've only actually been at like one event the whole year. At home grounds, it didn't inspire too much faith because they just looked so uncoordinated in how they play. They picked the Breeze, and they were just all over the place on Breeze. I'm not sure like what they were thinking in home grounds, if they wanted to like try hard there, test some new strats out, or if they were just just completely messing about because it didn't matter. But it's like the base mechanics of the game felt off. Like their timings, their coordination, their even like trading and things like that just felt slightly off there. So I don't think this group is ideal for them with Vision Strikers and Cloud9 in it. It's not a team I see making much of a dent into those two.
But with basically a roster that hasn't been looking too well in terms of like timings or working out for trades, or just trying to coordinate themselves a little bit better in terms of like the main core, the idea behind the strat. So looking at the macro of what you're trying to complete in these rounds for Fnatic, are we seeing something positive right now for Fnatic so far here, Mike, that could be like, okay, well, there is some sort of glimpse of hope. There is a light at the end of the tunnel, that if you're working out on the coordination, then the rest of it is just going to fall into place quite well. Again, thinking about the idea of the macro from the round to round of how they set up.
Yeah, I think you might have picked the wrong guy for the positive take. But for me, the thing I always respected about Fnatic before, and like a boaster team, was even from the early days of Summon FC, I think they realized that they don't match up to a lot of these teams firepower-wise. And that's when you saw like the cool strats come in. They're really coordinated in post plans, retakes, they're spacing on these execs. And that's all the stuff that I feel like's lacking right now, especially when I was watching the Liquid and Giants game from the past event, which is definitely concerning to me, because at that point it feels like the team has lost their identity, which was the whole point of like this heavily coordinated team, and that's how they make up for their lack of firepower. Because I definitely think like over there that they've made some really good upgrades, but with Durka's and Doma's form right now, like if you're comparing like a duelist and the secondary duelist on a lot of these teams as a matchup, they don't really match up too well against anyone in this group. Like you're
Mhm.
looking at, they're going up against Leaf and
Leaf.
Zeppa.
Yep.
Yeah, they're going up against PTC John Olsen, which that's more of an even one, obviously.
Mhm.
And then you have, I guess, Buzz and Stacks would be about the one for Vision Strikers. So I think that's definitely concerning from them if they've kind of lost that core identity, because I don't know, it's just so weird watching Fnatic team and the space, like people are peeking too early when they're executing on a site and someone gets killed. It's just like little things like that that really looked like they were run down in Red Bull.
Yeah. I mean, it makes
one
sense.
of the strengths for Fnatic, and like historically at least, has been being ahead of the meta. Like Bosa is a really good
Yeah.
IGL, and he like thinks of the game in a really good way. But if they can manage to get ahead of the meta for champions again, I think they could actually have a shot of making it out of this group. But if they can't, then yeah, as Mike says, I don't think they stack up to the other people on the other players on the teams. Just even in terms of raw firepower, I don't think like yeah, as you said, Durka, I don't think he's at the same level as the other Jets in this tournament. You know, like he's not that Yay, that Tens, that Leaf, whatever it is. It's just not there.
Yeah.
Feels like we haven't seen his Iceland form at all since Iceland ever, because
Yeah.
he looked really hot out the gates at Iceland, but
Yeah.
just hasn't seemed to get back to that level yet.
Yeah, we'll have to see. We'll have to see how they're going to be able to activate Durka and that too. And I think you both make a great point actually to see how they evolve quite well around the meta. Where when you're playing pulse plants on Bind, which is why they were like unstoppable too, is how aggressive they were with the Brimmy Viper to just get into these sites, plant, and then play pulse plants. You don't have to shoot anybody. But at that point now, when you're starting to play utility, you need to get your fraggers to come out. I think one player was potentially even Mystic into Iceland. That could be that person that could help out for Fnatic going into champions in terms of firepower, because he looked pretty good too on that Haven map, except for the what happened towards the end versus Sentinels. But I think there's still potential. We'll see what Anders also brings to the table too. Ever since he's been starting to work with them, but. Yeah, best of luck here for Fnatic. We're hoping for the best. At least looking at so far the clips that I've been watching with the press conference that's been going on, Boaster still has a very positive attitude and continues to be funny as fuck. So I think they're still coming into this event with some pressure, but at least alleviated from how it's great here for from Boaster to bring up the morale for the team. So yeah, let's go in straight into it. Talk about Cloud9, talk about Vanity, talk about Scrim9, talk about how good Cloud9 has been looking. Talk about Cloud9 winning LCQ and NA that was predicted by DDK, Sideshow, and myself. And this roster, I think we could still continue to go on that high. I mean, Tanny, you're looking at Vanity that's potentially been the huge upgrade and a missing piece that's been looking for, that Cloud9's been looking for in terms of like an IGL or structure in the team.
Yeah, I mean the IGL is invaluable for that team. Like it is exactly what they needed. They've gone through a lot of roster iterations now since the start, and they seem to manage to find the 5 where they can actually do something with it, and they look scary if I'm honest. In LCQ, especially the way Leaf plays is just so good. Like the aggressive style he takes on the Jet is it reminds me a little bit of Ye and how he plays. And I think that's what they need. Like that, it's proven to work now. And going into this group, I think he's probably the strongest Jet actually in this group.
That said, we talk about how Leaf is looking good so far, and Mike's. It's time for me to ask you about how good the KO looks for Zeppa. Like how has this been looking so good for Cloud9 with Zeppa as a KO?
Yeah, unfortunately, and then they switched off to it, and then they won out the event. Unfortunately for you, I was gonna say, but I definitely like that they came out with the different comps afterwards. They lost to Rise because I think they said it was Leaf's idea to switch up the comps, and they kind of went to like the Sage Rays on Ascent. They started playing a bit more Sky, which I definitely thought looked better on some of the maps where KO wasn't working as well for them. The maps where KO was working great, like Breeze, still looked really good. But I think for me, the biggest thing about Cloud9 is they seem like a very, obviously there's the whole experience factor between Leaf, Zeppa, and Vandy coming back from CS, but they just seem like a very collected team, and if stuff goes wrong, they just talk it out, and they don't really have to like talk anyone down from a cliff or deal with people getting upset about things. They just kind of talk things out, which I think is really going to come in handy for this group going up against a team like Vision Strikers. Because I remember when we first scrimmed them, that was one of the things when you first play that style for the first time, you really have to sit down and talk about the different things they're doing and how you're going to try to adjust to it, because it's so different from anyone you've played in NA, EU, just any sort of those regions. So I definitely think Cloud9 have a very like fundamental way of playing the game. So I'll be interested to see, you know, like you're saying with the comps, if they'll switch those up at all, how that'll impact these matches as well.
Yeah. Because even then, like Cloud9, I guess didn't get to play LCQ NA on quote unquote land because of everything that happened. But overall, when you talk about the experience that Vanity, Leaf, and Zeppa has got with Chaos 9, I think it was like a summit. I think they got that experience as well to play against international teams. They have an experience on LAN. We have everything that happened between Zeppa and Leaf and the Brazilian side for CSGO. But even the other two players, right? Mitch also has experience from CSGO because he had his time playing with Selfless, and that was with Ryu's organization, and he has that experience. Zeta has been playing for Cloud9 Korea, where Valorant in Korea has pretty much always been on LAN, pretty much. So that has that experience in itself. So I think the questions that people may have in terms of the LAN jitters is not going to be there for C9. And I think Vanity is just going to be able to keep that composure anyways for the team to be like, he doesn't really care. He looks so, not necessarily spaced out, but so calm in face of like any type of adversity that he just brushes off any type of comments and doubts that people may have of him. And he just likes using Twitter right after to shut everybody up and be like, yep, they thought I was going to be a top IGL. They thought that we're going to be a top team. The Scrim 9 is back. Like, you know that he's going to be very vocal about anybody that doubts him, which is what I love about the attitude of C9 so far going into this tournament. So I'm really looking forward to see what C9 is going to bring to the table too. And I think, again, the matchup works pretty well against Fnatic because that's their first big test, right? Because they've been looking so good online. They've been looking so good for the LCQ, but they also face off against a team that was a finalist in Iceland. And we will definitely see if, all that hype online is going to carry over to their LAN performances here at Champions. But let's move on over here. Let's talk about Full Sense, because you talked about John Olsen and PTC here, Mikes. And for me personally, after watching, again, like the APAC Last Chance qualifiers and watching Full Sense, even people are putting Full Sense pretty high up in the Scrim Bucks or even in the rankings going into this tournament because of PTC and of John Olsen. But I think it ends there. I unfortunately do not see too much coming out of like Labby Snacks or Chalalala. Like, not necessarily in terms of like frags. It's not about that. I think it's more about the lack of utility mid rounds or understanding how to play the mid rounds for this team that just falls apart for them overall.
Yeah, and I think like Superbus, when I was watching them, had some decent moments, it seemed like, but my main concern was with how much of their defensive halves revolve around, okay, we need PCC and John Olsen to gain all these kills on every defensive round. Like,
yeah.
You look at their setups and they're just taking aggro fights all the time, and everyone else is just kind of set up to not die, to not give up space. So those guys can kind of do their thing. Except there are so many rounds. I remember watching Acend, PTC's playing KO and he just dry peeks off Cat defense and gets a 2K on two people contacting up Cat, which I feel like that isn't very reliable for them playing against a team like C9 or Vision Strikers or Fnatic even. They're just going to be really structured and be able to deal with that. And I also thought their attacking sides were a bit weak because they're doing a lot of 4-1 defaults, which when you're struggling at the macro level with those types of defaults, I feel like a lot of these teams are just going to eat that up and be able to outread you a lot of the time.
Yeah. Tanya, you see something different? You see something that we don't, and then it's like, fuck it. SCA is going to be able to upset like Paper Rex does when you guys scrimmed against them.
Honestly, no. This reflects in my power rankings as well. Like, I don't see this team doing that much here. Like, I think this is also their like first LAN that they've played. So this is going to be like a big step up, considering it's the biggest event of the year as well. If they were in a different group, if it was like Group C, I could see them maybe beating teams like, you know, Crazy Raccoons or Secret, but I don't see them like being Fnatic, Cloud9, or Vision Strikers here. As Mike said, I think they're just going to get read very hard because the way they play is good, but it's basic. So it's not. If you're coming in and you're lacking on the firepower end, you need to come out with something special on the strats end.
Yeah.
And they don't seem to be doing it right now. You know, like they might have changed it since the last round's qualifier, but nothing so far.
This is why like a potential full sense against Fnatic is going to be a really good matchup too, because you have a team like Full Sense that's a little bit one-dimensional or missing layers in terms of their defaults, right? Versus a Fnatic that actually is able to evolve around the meta and maybe shape the meta quite well for a team. But the meta wouldn't work out too well if your duelists and your fraggers cannot fight and win against the John Olsen and the PTCs, which is why I think that evens up quite well. And are we actually on the high of like how PTC looks like in terms of his skill on KO here, Mike's? Because again, I know I talk a lot about KO as a joke, but overall, it's what everybody is talking about, right? Like even for me, if I compare Zeppa's KO to PTC's KO, I'm still gonna have to give that over to Zeppa anyways because of who PTC has to play against in his region and whatnot. So I still have to give that competitive edge over to the North American side of that thing. And I don't know if do you see PTC playing KO in a different style that's like, okay, maybe we should pay attention to PTC if they decide to play a comp with a KO in there.
I think the one that I go back to a lot is when I was watching their Ascent game in the final. It didn't feel like a lot of the value he was finding was from the utility. It was more just the timings he was taking, whether that was like gain of timing, pushing A main late rounds on defense, or, you know, what I was talking about earlier, walking off cat, winning those two gunfights, something like that. It didn't seem like the KO was, their strategy wasn't like built around it, you know?
Yeah.
Where a lot of these teams are trying to play like more reactive or they have protocols based off of it. It just seems kind of like this is a agent with like good flashes and we can kind of use it reactively to stop hits sometimes. But it didn't seem like there's a large amount of their strategy based around it.
Well, with that, then it comes down to our prediction side, and it's time for chat to also try to predict. It's hard for me to figure out who's going to be moving over as that. Well, maybe not. I was just gonna say it's more between Fnatic and Full Sense to see who's gonna be able to win between that. But after watching a bit of Full Sense, I think I'm still gonna give that victory over for Fnatic. But Tanny, starting with you, man, who's gonna be that #1 seed and 2 seed for VS and for C9?
Oh, this is hard. Yeah. I'm leaning Vision Strikers here, actually.
Vision Strikers as top seed?
Yeah, I'm not even sure why I'm leaning Vision Strikers because I actually like C9 more as a team, but I know I think they just got a bit unlucky last time into Gambit, so I'm hoping they make it deeper now.
That's it. I mean, Daniel was saying, or Ian, sorry, was saying it's because Achilles and Paper Thin were so convincing that they brought our Copium back here over to Vision Strikers as that #1.
Achilles has been on the career Copium for a long
for
time,
quite a long
even in
time.
Overwatch.
They got the new turn jersey. They got the Vision Strikers jersey. There's going to be the next one that's going to come out for the Korean super team. But, Mike, what are your thoughts? Do you think we have here Fnatic getting any upsets going out of this, or is it pretty much the Vision Strikers C9 as well?
I think it's Vision Strikers C9. I think C9 will come out first seed. I think a lot of people are going Vision Strikers first seed, but I think C9 will be able to counter a lot of what they do. I should have gotten my C9 t-shirt out or something during one of the breaks, but get on the Paper Thin route.
We should have. Yeah. We should have. But what, so how do you think that C9 is going to figure out Vision Strikers though in that matchup? Like, because right now the word is that Stax is just fucking dominating so far, not only in IGLing but just fragging too.
Yeah, well, I think just on paper, the firepower matches up pretty well for both teams.
Yeah.
I think before we even get like to strategy stuff, I think the Zeta versus Vision Strikers arc is pretty cool as well, because I know he's been dying to do that.
Yeah.
But I think for me, like the thing I talked about earlier, where C9, I think Vision Strikers, when you scrim them for the first time or play them, it can be very frustrating because it feels like they're just writing it down on you on certain rounds, you know, or they have these really stupid trap setups that be long and then you get breach stunned and flashed and you're like, this is fucking stupid.
Yeah.
But I think C9 are a team that they're not going to freak out over that stuff and they're going to be able to, you know, collectively, if they're down a bit, take a timeout, talk about what they're doing and get back into the game. Where I think a lot of teams, like, I feel like Acend from Berlin, it felt like that Vision Strikers was just able to do whatever they wanted versus them. At no point felt that Acend was going to get back into that game. So I think that's the edge that C9 has in their calm and collective process. I think that should do pretty well for them.
Yeah,
honestly, Acend were pretty tilted at that game. I talked to Zeke like afterwards at the hotel, and he was like, "They're just the best team in the world. Like we just died. Every single execute was perfect, and we just died. Like it didn't manage to get into the game at all."
This is gonna be definitely a fun matchup though between the C9 and Vision Strikers for that to happen because. Which, by the way, I'll put my predictions up to. I'll put Vision Strikers as #1 and Cloud9 as #2. And also because of that arc of Zeta against Vision Strikers, because in C9 Korea with Munchkin and Zeta, they have already played the likes of Vision Strikers where they kind of know the tech of Zeta, right? Where Zeta coming into North America is holy shit, like there is value in a breach. There is value in how well he plays as a Sova, but that's just like a regular Tuesday for a breach and a Sova being played by Vision Strikers on that end and on that arc. I think they could figure out Zeta a little bit well in that sense, but I think the edge could also go back to C9 overall because they probably only just appeared on the blip of the radar for all of these top teams in the world now that they've qualified into champions just by beating Rise, just by winning the LCQ, that maybe after that it's like, oh shit, we might have to pay attention to C9 Blue and not 100 Thieves. I think everybody else was pretty much prepared more for 100 Thieves going to the world stage than they would for Cloud9. So I think that's where Cloud9 could definitely have like, I don't want to call it a dark horse because I still think that they'll look really good in this tournament for C9, but at least a dark horse against the top tier teams right now. I think C9 could also be considered a top tier team going to this tournament. So that's the fun part about that. So chat seem to think the same thing in general, that Vision Strikers is going to have that #1 and Cloud9 Blue as that #2. And that said, man, I don't know what it is, but it kind of sucks for you guys for the editing side for Valoranting and all that stuff too, that putting me as a host, we could never go under 3 hours. So we made it at 3 hours and 8 minutes for this show today, gentlemen. So I think it's definitely time to close it off because you know what? We got some shit happening right after this one, Mike. So we're going to go hang out with Wyatt to do the same thing again.
Yep, all back over again.
Yeah. So outside of that, though, what's in store for you, Mikes? Give us the leaks in the background of who you've been trialing for as a coach.
I've got nothing cooking there. I was stupid last night and talking to Dan until like 6 in the morning. I'm like, oh yeah, I got stuff I need to actually do today. So at least I brought some energy to it.
Hell yeah, appreciate it. You did good. I've been sleeping at 6 a.m. my time as well, but you know, it's the life. We've been fucking up our schedule just so we can get ready for Berlin this week, right? So that's why we've been staying up. Just so we get super tired today, sleep super early tonight, and then wake up on time for Champions starting tomorrow. So Tanny, also a big thank you for hopping on, man, for coming back for what, 2-3 weeks? Was it 2 weeks in a row, or do we have a gap in between?
No, 2.
Yeah. So thank you for coming on and hanging out with us, man. It's been a super fun day to break down these groups with you. And let me know what's in store right now for Tanny in the next month.
Don't worry, it's same as Mike's. Absolutely nothing.
Yeah, so
just gonna chill, watch the Champions games.
You guys are similar to me, where I usually have competition with my peers to like try to get casting gigs where my peers got champions and I didn't. Now you guys are pitted against each other to try to get a coaching gig in NA or EU. So good luck to both of you guys, and hopefully we'll see
for all the teams to get nuked.
Yeah, a team can just get us both.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're just watching. We're just watching and waiting to see what happens after Champions. And that said, Champions starts tomorrow, and I think that's going to be at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I think we're going with 3 matches a day. So make sure that you pull out your caffeine, whatever you need to stay up, go to bed early, and also wake up early to watch the immense and intense games that's about to come up here for Champions. The last big Valorant tournament for 2021 is going to be starting tomorrow, so you don't want to miss it. But until then, we thank you so much for hanging out with us today, tonight, and also good morning for those that just woke up. We'll see you next time.